We'll now move to the work session. Work session of the Goodyear City Council, May 3, 2010. All items, and there's one main item listed. Now, for discussion only, no action can or will be taken. So all members of council are in attendance, and we have one item, and that's review of budget consideration and policy discussion. And is this also a retreat?
Of a sense, yes.
Okay. Okay. John, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. We have a ton of information for you this evening. We apologize in advance. You just got the packets. We understand that. So you'll want to go through them and study them and the material that also we'll be handing out along with this. But then we can talk about it again next week. So the agenda for this evening is the Citizen Budget Committee recommendations. We want to review each of the 27 of those and tell you what we are doing with them. We have the fiscal year 11 operating budgets. I am going to ask Larry Lang to go over those. We have the fiscal year 11 capital improvement plan. I will just review that. You had that 2 weeks ago. We have the city center. I've asked Brian Dalkey to make a presentation to you on that. And we have the review of the 3 different scenarios that we have reviewed with you, and we'll review that with you. Then the city manager recommendations for fiscal year 11 and questions and council discussion. The Citizen Budget Committee, this was established by the City Council in November of 2009. We held 12 meetings, they held 12 meetings, which were conducted between January and April 2010. They made a presentation to the City Council on April 26th, a couple weeks ago, and they recommended 27 different budget recommendations to the City Council. They were grouped into 15 that were highly recommended, and the other 12, I guess, were recommended. Over 5,000 hours of staff time was put into this during the 4 or 5 months that it was in effect, which was a significant commitment of the city to help staff the Budget Committee. And the recommendations, to as great an extent as possible, with the limited time that we've had, have been incorporated as part of the fiscal year 11 budget, and we will review those this evening for you.
John?
Yes.
A question. Of the 15 that were proposed, that they felt that we should activate on, how many had we been working on up to that time?
I will have to look at them as we go through. Most of them, I believe. Some of them, for example, the billboard, that of course we were working on because we brought that back to you within a week of their making a recommendation, and then some others. But I will try to mention each one as I review.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Number one, I have 27 slides with each slide for one of the recommendations. Actually, there are more than 27 because some of the slides go over to other items. The reduced employee compensation and benefits. So this is their recommendation. In fiscal year 11, we have no merit increase included into the budget. This is the 3rd year without an increase. We saved approximately, we're going to have to make an investment someday to catch back up, but we saved approximately $1 million in the fiscal year 11 budget, $1.1 million in the fiscal year 10 budget, and $1.2 million in the fiscal year 9 budget. So we've saved $3.3 million to date. No market adjustment. This will be the 2nd year without a market adjustment, and that will save us approximately $107,000 in the fiscal year 11, and it saved the city $1.3 million in fiscal year 10. And suspend longevity pay. That's something that was recommended. We had already looked at that and made that decision that, yes, we had to suspend longevity pay, and that's $123,000 estimated savings this next year. And then suspend health retirement savings account, which is going to save us approximately $190,000 in this next year. Also, we have 25% increase in employee contribution toward total $5.1 million health care premium. This is a recommendation that they made. We had been working on this for some months.
Okay, let me ask you a question on that. How is the insurance committee impacted on this?
They recommended.
They did?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Out-of-pocket impact to employees range from 5% to 47% increase depending on the health care plan that they choose. The health insurance plan design, the changes result in the following increases. And all of these were reviewed and recommended by the insurance committee.
Right.
33% primary doctor copay, 133% specialist copay. These are increases. 100% outpatient copay, and 100% inpatient. The primary doctor is going from $15 to $20. The specialists are going from $15 to $35. The outpatient net is going from $250 to $500. And the inpatient net is going from $250 to $500.
John, real quick, on the insurance, my understanding, part of the reason for the recommendation, because wasn't some of your earlier costs coming in at about $1 million, and as a result of the changes to the plan, it dropped to what?
$400,000.
So the committee themselves, which is made up of the employees, recommended recommended these plans so that the city could save. So I just want to make sure that that's covered as well.
Thank you. Suspend tuition reimbursement. This will be the second year that that's removed from the budget. 7 of 10 cities that we compare ourselves to have continued their tuition reimbursement. Suspending the criteria-based promotion program. That'll save approximately $126,000 during this next year. Keep reduction to the uniform allowance. The fire department, as you'll recall, offered up the half of the allowance. This will be the second year of that suspension, and that's $92,000 per year savings. Suspend the vacation cash-in. That's $116,000 in savings to the city. Overtime holiday rate reduced from time and a half to the FLSA regular rate. This will be the second year that that's in place, and it'll save us $113,000 again. We saved $113,000 in fiscal year 10. And then continue to suspend police officer hiring bonus. You may recall we had a $2,000 bonus if you recommended somebody that came and was hired by the city. We haven't made any payments in that for a while, but we have decided to suspend that just so somebody can't claim it. Recommendation 2.
Oh, John?
Yes, sir, sorry.
In the report by the Budget Committee, they also asked us to consider furloughs and reduction.
And I will address
percentage reduction in pay.
And I will address that later, Jim. Those were examples that they recommended to do this, and this. I just shared with you all of the different things that we are doing. We will get to the furloughs and the pay. So, going forward, use zero-based budgeting from current actual expenditures in order to right-size city departments. We will evaluate the current practice, which we consider a base budget approach, and let me explain what that means, base budgeting. Currently, the city uses base budget. The prior year's base budget, with adjustments for actual spending, is examined against trends for future projections. During the annual budget process, departments' base budgets are reviewed in comparison to year-to-date spending and also historical spending trends. Adjustments may be made to line item budgets to reflect changes in spending or available revenues. Must balance to target budget or less. Monthly and quarterly financial reviews are held with each department to discuss expenditure, trending, and budget analysis. We operate under a very thorough budget system. Budget reduction practice, we currently implement 15 to 25% budget reductions as a method of base budgeting reductions. This method has been used for fiscal year 9, 10, and 11. A target budget reduction amount converted to a percentage amount is identified, and departments are required to submit adjusted base budgets that reflect the percent needed or required. Budget reductions are reviewed and implemented based upon, first, least amount of impact to the public and services provided, second, the demand for service, and third, whether or not there are mandated, non-mandated, or discretionary items and programs. This year, for example, as we went through this, the city took approximately $780,000 in commodities and contractual services and $1.7 million in personnel costs, resulting in 21 additional frozen positions. The total mid-year reduction was $2.5 million. So the city used this rate sizing method to give us dollars mid-year based on run rates, as the committee referred to. The questions, right-sizing city departments is as ongoing as vacancies occur. The questions we ask when a vacancy does occur, we ask the department directors the following questions. First, do you have the ability to assume the responsibilities of this vacancy within the department without the use of overtime, or can it be filled with a temporary, part-time, non-benefited position? Secondly, do you have the ability to redeploy, recruit internal staff, and freeze the position that was vacated to fill this position? Third, what are the adverse impacts to the citizens, city departments, if this position is not filled? Those questions are asked, and the results of that is that fiscal year to date, we are tracking at filling 1 in 3 positions that are vacated due to attrition.
What's the count on that, John?
Right now, we're at...
Well, let me rephrase it. At the beginning of this fiscal year, you had 500 and some positions that were authorized to be filled. As a result of people leaving the city, how many of them were not filled that will be saved in this upcoming budget from a count standpoint?
Overall, since we began this process, we're at 86 positions.
But I'm talking about this year.
This year, it's probably at 27 or something.
So there's an additional 27 positions in your base budget that no longer will be in this upcoming base budget as part of the savings that's going towards some of your personnel savings.
That's correct.
Okay.
John, could you have somebody explain, maybe I'm the only one that's having trouble with this, but the difference between base budget and zero-based budget?
I was going to ask
Larry?
that question.
Larry Lane, come up.
I will try to explain this. I didn't bring my notes on that question, and I'm going to try to explain this in the context of what the committee talked about zero-based budgeting and what their intent was. The zero-based budget that the committee talked about was a process of reviewing actual activity that took place during a period of time. And the example that they had data for was the full fiscal year for June 30th of 2009, 12 months data, plus they had 6 months data for the current year. And very simply, and obviously the discussion was a lot more than this, but very simply, any deviations from the current level that we're expending funds, in other words, that the actual expenditures are taking place, that would require us to track those differences, well, not track, to show support for those differences, that you would see then what those differences are that would cause that. We would have to rationalize them for them to be accepted. Base budgeting starts with a base budget and goes on exceptions from there. And so there are certain elements in there that, you know, especially on the operating expense side, it really lends itself very well on tracking the historical expenditures of that. The personnel gets a little more complicated under budget law. I'm not sure, did that answer that? Or
If I could just add, that is the explanation of Mary as to what the committee was thinking. That is not the definition of zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting is when you start from scratch every year and you build a new budget. And so you basically start as if you aren't doing anything, and then you build the budget based on that. And that's zero-based budgeting in reality.
Well, that's what I thought it was.
Do you have
But the committee was
carryover?
talking what
You have
Larry was talking.
carryovers.
Yeah.
In a zero, yeah, in either case, carryovers would be a factor. I think one of the key differences that drove the committee is that the information that we gave them showed budgetary data and mixed certain costs in various places, and it was very hard to follow until we were able to give them actual comparative data on a monthly basis for the critical operating line items, and that's what they really focused on, and that's what, moving forward, we're going to analyze against what we're doing. We did that at the individual level. How can we do this globally?
So you're actually going to show that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we're going to just compare both of them as we move forward. And this was a moving forward recommendation.
What do you call base budget? What is this? You say you start with a base budget. What determines that this is the base?
Generally, in a base budget process, the base becomes the, if you will, the operating or ongoing expenditures from one year carry forward to the next. So if we need to add a position for a police officer, once it's in the budget, it becomes part of the base. That's the concept of a base. Doesn't mean it can't ever go out. It can be reviewed, but that gets reviewed based on the history at a department level. But that's where it gets into the base. Ongoing costs that would happen on that never happens on a one-time cost. The capital cost, for example, that would not happen.
So the base budget would be based on where you are with personnel, where you are with all your expenditures at the end of that budget year, or at that point in the budget year that you wanted to make that determination.
The base budget would calculate the personnel costs for 10 positions, if you had 10 positions in a department. And it assumes that all 10 of those positions are filled.
So that carries over, and even if
The
you don't
next year, you
extend
would
it.
start at 10 positions again, and they would be calculated as if fully
If they were
funded.
hired.
If a position was vacant for 4 months of the year, the actual cost would be less for that vacancy. There's certain other estimates in the personnel, but it's the 10 positions that get budgeted from one year to the next.
And on zero, you zero it out. You would never have them carried over to the next budget.
On a pure zero base, but
Okay.
that's not what the committee was referring to, that extreme.
Well, that's what I thought it was.
I thought they were too. But
That would be every one of the 500 and some positions would start at zero.
then the base budget, we start a fiscal year and we accept that which exists. Is that correct? Whereas zero base, you accept nothing that exists and you have to justify everything.
That would be the perception, but no, that is not correct. It still is, if you're not spending your money, and that's where I think it's a blend of these two in the process with you, but also internally, we've done this. If you're not spending the appropriation in one year, the question has to be answered, why didn't you spend it this year?
Why carry it over?
And why do you need it next year? And that has to be part of the analysis, and that's the key concept that I think the committee was talking about. It shouldn't just be assumed that you've got this little savings account, every year you appropriate it, and never spend it. It should be built into the process, it should be questioned, you should have to be able to support why that needs
You're
to be
carrying
in the
anything
budget.
over Into the next year's budget.
It was,
So-
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
As I read through the committee's proposals, I picked up something that said you take the current year's budget, and carry that over to the coming year. How can you function that way if that were to happen?
The current, I think more the focus that the committee was talking about is not the budget, but the actual amounts being spent.
It's justifying
And
what you're
showing,
putting in the budget.
and what they're asking is if you're going to change spending patterns from how you're actually spending the money today, you need to show why that's changing. And that needs to be part of the approval process. I think that would be the key difference.
So are you saying that you can combine the two forms of budget?
I think the
Combine that particular, part of it into the way the budget is run now, so that we would have that opportunity?
I would call ours a modified zero-based budgeting, because we've cut $17 million out of this budget in the time I've been here, 2+ years. And that all has not come easily.
No, I don't, John, listen, I don't question that at all, and I see those numbers. I'm just looking at, we're looking at, okay, we're carrying this over, right, 100 policemen, we're carrying it over. So before it could be carried over to the next year's budget, is everybody understanding this way? We would have that opportunity to question whatever it is.
If we had 10 positions authorized in a department or in an area, but we only had 8 filled throughout the year.
Right.
And I'm using positions because it's a big part, but there's obviously a number of different variables. But in an example, you only had 8 of them filled throughout the year. So then the next year we come back and the base budget says 10 positions. The question is why?
Okay, that's.
And the answer might be supportable, it might not,
Then I
but the question needs to be asked. And to really be simple on it, I think that was the trend.
And aren't we kind of getting to that point, because there's, 85 positions, that one of the recommendation from the Budget Committee was to those frozen positions was to eliminate them. It's following up on that question, I guess, the Vice Mayor had, is at some point in this presentation, you're going to show us those positions that you recommend to
Yes.
eliminate, and those, for whatever reasons, to continue. And it follows on what you were mentioning there, Vice Mayor, as far as this budget, why they should come out. Because if they stay in there, then you could fill them, and et cetera. Priorities change, so.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thanks, Larry.
Well, wait,
Larry, wait.
how do we, we just can't, and I don't think the Vice Mayor wants to either, we just can't discount the recommendation. So how do we capture the recommendation and ensure that at least, as a minimum, that which was not expended in the past fiscal year is questioned and has to be justified in the next fiscal year? How do we make sure that's going to happen as a minimum, correct?
Yeah, and I agree with you completely, and I don't think it's the intent of any of these comments or any of us to completely discount what the committee's saying, or to discount at all. As part of the process, as we move forward, we will show you tracking expenditures as compared to what the base budget is.
Okay, now, I'm going to interrupt. So what you would be doing for us is something different, presented differently than we've had it presented before. Is that what I'm hearing?
There is a schedule that's included in the budget book that we just started putting in the budget book, and it had some numbers that were very difficult to follow. We updated those numbers. Part of what the committee also, if you remember Mike Kiak's report, part of what he also talked about is use a database over a period of time. That information assembled that way, I think, is an excellent starting point to provide you that data. That's historically been in the budget book. I think what part of the point of that is now we bring that forward as part of the presentations moving forward.
To make it understandable.
And so that you can ask the questions,
Yes.
why is this large? And I think that's
Okay.
an oversimplification, but I think that is what they're looking for, is to show what we've been spending and how that changes.
And by showing it, possibly impacting the budget.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're asking those questions.
But this is also, we put it off into the fiscal year 12, because we've only had this report for a week or two. We put it off in fiscal year 12 that we will evaluate base budgeting for you and zero-based budgeting and make any changes that are necessary in next year's budget for that purpose.
But I will have to say, even though you're putting it off to that, the fact that the council kind of knows a question to ask, if if it is cloudy in their mind, just by having this process tonight will give us the opportunity to question.
Yeah.
Why is that being put off till 12? Why not 11?
Because of
Time is the only reason, Frank. We have to have a budget approved by June 24th.
Final budget by June 14th. We
By
have
June
scheduled.
You're talking about for 10, 11.
Yes, fiscal
Okay,
year
I thought
10,
you-
11, fiscal year 12.
Okay.
That's right. So next year's budget, a year from now.
Yeah. So, wait a minute, Jim. Okay. So, what you're telling us that you're going to take, if possible, you're going to take something from zero and base and try to meld them at some point? No? Yes?
We're going to provide you with detailed information on our expenditure patterns for our operating expenditures, in addition to the budgetary information we're providing today. And that is what we're going to be looking at in this process.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, this table shows you the employees per thousand. We have current funded positions of 8.12 employees per thousand. And we also show in the blue the number of employees it would take to reach the informal goal that this city has always operated under of 10 employees per thousand. As you can see, we have been coming down 9.74, well, 10.42 in fiscal year 7-8, 9.74 employees per thousand in fiscal year 8 and 9, 9.46 employees per thousand in fiscal year 9 and 10, and right now we're at 8.12 employees per thousand for this current fiscal year. And importantly, if you look at it without the ballpark, and I only point this out since the ballpark is a new service that we've added during this economic problem, if you looked at it the way it was before, we'd have 7.72 employees per thousand given this current year. And what's interesting is that I took a look at also the population during these same times. We are 2.18 employees per thousand lower right now than we were in 07-08. That's 21.8% less employees. Our population, meantime, went up 8.4%. And population usually is directly correlated to the service levels. So quite frankly, this is what we've been working under and trying to get the organization right size. And I only point these figures out to you so that you can feel comfortable that we are indeed taking the recommendation of the Budget Committee very seriously, and we are trying to right size the government. Where does right size exist? I can't answer that. Only you, the policy people, can answer that.
John? Oh, I'm sorry. I have two questions. First, how does this compare to other cities our size?
We're doing that right now, Sherry. We'll have to get that to you.
And then my other question would be, how much is this people who are in management or middle management, where have we expanded? Have we just expanded in the management category, or have we expanded in the people doing the service? That's my concern. Because I'll be honest, I looked through the Goodyear salary scale, and having worked for Phoenix for 13 years, we're a much smaller city, and our salaries are, those ranges are awfully high, which I was kind of, I'm hearing about cut insurance benefits, and that's going to affect the person making $40,000 a lot more than it's going to affect the person making $100,000. So I'd like a little more information on this if we could.
Okay. I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Good point.
Restructure current debt. We plan to have a fall work session, and I ask you, is that soon enough? We're planning a fall work session for you to review our PIC series bonds for 2008 spring training facilities with the GO funds and the rainy day fund. And so that's how we're proposing that we answer this recommendation.
I read something in the paper that Larry was working on this,
Working on
the restructuring.
what we were just talking about.
On the PIC bonds you're talking about?
Yeah,
Refinancing.
refinancing, period.
We're looking at, yes, we're constantly refinancing, and Larry's constantly refinancing. But Larry, why don't you come up?
He's talking about going from state to carrying it as a private carrier, is that the idea?
No, the article in the paper was about investment monies. We look at and have been looking at investment policies. We'll be bringing investment policies back to you before we have any discussion, but it's unrelated to this.
Oh, okay.
Quick question, as you explore this specific topic, we also, I assume, explore, I know the PIC bonds, before you refinance them in the GOs is, first of all, not only the capacity, but do we have the legal authority to take some of those PIC bonds for the stadium and refinance as parks? I know you could call it a park, some have said it's a park, but to take a look at the question that went to the ballot when it was originally authorized to make sure, number one, you feel comfortable enough that it's legal. And personally, always have concerns on refinancing that because I'm not sure that was the intent, even if the question is vague on that. So I'd like to see all those explored when we come back and have some of those questions for us as well.
Absolutely. Support economic development for new revenue. We are currently working on Suntech, which you're all aware of, 150 jobs to the community. Tower, which is going to bring 200 jobs to the community. We're working on prospects that total 630 jobs being brought to the community. And then we're also working on a leading edge marketing campaign to market the city. Focus on business retention. We have business relationships help us identify companies looking at new locations or expanding, and it's something that we always try to be on top of. We are starting this year a Leading Edge Awards dinner, so that will be tying into our marketing campaign called the Leading Edge Marketing Campaign. And then we focus on expanding business already in place. Small business seminars and the B3 program. B3 stands for Building Bridges to Business, and we're trying to do 4 to 6 of those a year.
John, are we going to, under that, take in the subject of signs?
Yes, we will.
Okay, just want to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Adjust rainy day fund policy to help with the recession. We hope to have this discussion with the City Council next week, May 10th. We'll have a policy discussion with you on the use of the rainy day fund, which right now is 4 months of operating, and that's a requirement that we try to follow consistently within our charter and our guidelines. And this will be scheduled, as I mentioned, for next week for the City Council.
The rainy day fund, the 4 months is the maximum we're to maintain in the rainy day fund, correct? That's what the charter, it says it's the maximum.
Well, it doesn't say you can't go over that, but yes, it's our minimum requirement.
I thought
There's a minimum in there. I don't think it's a maximum.
Yeah, I think it is.
And it also isn't exactly, and this is why we're going to review it with you next week, it isn't exactly the charter requirement, because the charter requirement is that we keep, I think it's $2 million or something set aside. And then there's a rainy day fund is on top of that by council policy and council guideline.
I was reading somewhere, too, is there, and maybe Larry may know that, is it an Arizona League of Cities? I saw that somewhere, about 4 months.
Well, Ken
operating?
Strobick was quoted in the newspaper as saying 4 months, which surprised me to read that because all I'm familiar with is that the league has always talked 2 months minimum. So I'm not sure where that's coming from, but yes, he was in the paper saying 4 months was the recommendation.
That's what I thought I'd heard, okay.
Here's what, I ran this off today because a member of the committee had talked to me about the rainy day fund. And so the council may provide that from the money collected from the annual property tax levy and from the money received from other sources, a sum equal to not less than 2 1/2 cents on each $100 of the assessed value of said property may be placed in such fund. I don't know what that is, but we can find out. You know, probably. Until the accumulated amount of such fund shall be sufficient to meet all legal demands against the Treasury for the first 4 months or other necessary period of the succeeding fiscal year. So it sounds to me like we don't put more than, which is sort of surprising because we've talked about it as a minimum. And 4 months is sort of the high end. What is the low end at 2 1/2 cents?
What,
But it says an assessed value, right? So
Yeah.
it depends on when you do it. Like now, if you did it on our assessed
Well,
value.
no, but now. Yeah, what is now?
now would be low, I'm sure.
We have some schedules prepared for you next week to review this, but I'll give you the very simple answer. The charter requirement is an annual accumulation of 2.5%. It's not a cap at that 2.5%.
No, it is not.
So that paragraph is talking about how the council may put into that fund until it reaches four months. You're not required to put into that fund. The second paragraph, paragraph B in there, discusses how you can disperse that money, and you'll notice you have very little flexibility in dispersing that money.
And that's in the charter.
And that's from the charter.
Yes.
That fund balance today, we'll show you a schedule of how we get there, is approximately $3 million. And that's an accumulation that has been maintained over the years. The additional contributions that make up that, as John indicated a couple minutes ago, that make up the 16.9 that was in the adopted budget this year to get to the 4 months, is actually by policy of this group. That's how that's established. It includes that $3 million, but then the remaining 13, and there's 2 tiers to it, and we'll go over next week. But the $3 million one is the one referred to in the charter as that minimum amount. And that's an accumulation over 20 years or something.
So what are you saying, Larry, we got to the 4 months a little quicker?
The 4 months, we're going to talk about next week.
Okay.
And I want to be careful on that, because when you look at the charter, you don't have much discretion. If you build it through that rainy day fund, it just sits there. You want more discretion than that, and so the shells and mays of the first paragraph require discussion that we will do next week. How much more do you contribute into that for its purpose versus for your purpose of an operating rainy day fund?
So you're saying what's happening, you're making it inflexible, what you want, if we want a more flexible resource of funds to be able to use.
Moving forward,
Moving
you'll have
forward.
options, and we'll discuss
And
that
that
next
would give
week.
us-
And you still have options on the bulk of that money.
Okay.
Okay. We can't, we have to comply with the charter till the people
Absolutely.
change it.
Absolutely.
And it really isn't that clear to me, but what is 2.5 cents on 100?
Approximately $250,000 for the fiscal year 2010-2011 budget.
Not much, is it?
No?
That's an additional contribution you would put into the fund. That's correct.
If we were less than 4 months.
If you, yes, which you are for this calculation.
Right.
And I'll show you that next week, why I say that.
And it's, is it 50 million or 60 million that we're basing?
60. No, it's 50 some, I apologize.
50.
Yeah, it's about 50.3, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 4 months would be
16 and a
18.
half, roughly.
16.4.
that we would have at the end of the year. And right now, we're geared up to go about 20, right?
16.9 is the way we look at it, the required rainy day fund. We have 20 some that we're working with. Yes.
Yeah, so there is flexibility in that, and follow the charter at the same time.
Absolutely.
Number 6 was enhanced stadium revenues and retail. And we are committing that we will bring back quarterly report on different events hosted at the ballpark, plus future events. And we'll evaluate gain sharing program for ballpark staff responsible for bringing in revenue. And we'll do that within the next few months and bring that back to you.
John, the stadium in Glendale, they're booked up the entire year with shows, conventions, the whole bit. Why can't we do something like that for the park?
Well, primarily, you're talking about two different things, Dick. They're talking about Glendale's hotel, their jobbing arena.
I'm talking about what leasing they've done for the stadium themselves.
And they, to my knowledge, have not done all that much on the stadium, but the jobbing arena and then the hotel that they have there, the Renaissance, they bring in all kinds of things. Plus, the city of Glendale does not actually own and operate, does not actually operate that stadium. They don't have a use of it for the community, for example. they have it only 5 days a year because who are the two teams? The White Sox
Dodgers.
and the Dodgers, they have control of the stadium. So we, on the other hand,
The Cardinals. I'm talking about the
Are you talking
football
about
stadium.
Jobby.com or
Okay.
No, football stadium.
football stadium.
Football.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you where I'm coming from. When I was out there for a couple meetings with Jim and I, when we were talking about the baseball contracts, what have you, talked to the general manager of the stadium, of the stadium itself.
Phoenix Stadium.
Yeah, right. And he says, we have no problem. We're booked up 365 days as of today. Why can't we do something like, maybe not on that volume, but something like that out at our stadium?
Well, and that is certainly our goal. And we sent out last week a report on what events we have coming during the next few months. And as a brand-new facility, that's what we're shooting for, but we're a long ways from there.
And these are money events.
Well, many of them are money events, like we had in there the 3 graduations. They were roughly $5,000 each, $4,000 to $5,000 each. But on some of the events, like Little League, ends up costing the city money. But it's good to have the Little League tournaments there.
I agree, yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to maximize the revenue at the stadium while we maximize the use of the stadium.
Who in management of the stadium is going to be doing this along with you?
Nathan is in charge of it. And then we actually have a person on staff. Her primary function, her only function, is to seek and raise revenue for the stadium.
Okay. That's all I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Suspend capital projects unless for public safety or revenue recovery or savings. The capital budget, which we'll go through later, is, as you recall, $25.2 million for the CIP for next year. The general fund portion of that is $5.1 million. During fiscal year 11, we are focused on public safety and general infrastructure. We have a minimal impact to the general fund, and we've deferred the following projects from the CIP: Bullard Wash Linear Park, Estrella Park Phase 2, traffic signals, 2 of them, business solutions replacement, which is the HTE system, and then City Hall and Library. We will continue to pursue grants for the City Hall project, and we will also reevaluate the assessed valuation figures as we go through the CIP, because that is obviously what's driving our ability to borrow monies into the future. Number 8, reduce service level of bulk trash pickup. Right now, we don't think this is the best time to do that. We will evaluate program options and reduction of service level in conjunction with our green waste program. What the green waste program is a experimental project that the Public Works Department is working on along with the Parks Department. We have contracted with Hickman Farms, and they are taking all of the waste that we can give them and then grinding it up. They have furnished the containers for it to be put into. And this first month, I mean, it's only a month old, so the first month we made $312.50 off of this project. But it is looking towards the future and a future way that we may be able to divert all of our green waste. And so that's what we're looking at. And in fiscal year 12, the reason we don't think now is a good time, as you all recall, what we went through when we did make these changes, it took us a while to get the community used to the system that we're on right now. And so we just don't think it's good timing to come and make another change to it.
Do you have figures on what we are either saving or not saving by the changeover in the trash pickup?
Yes, I do, but it slips my mind right now. I'll have to get back to you on that. I do know that if we were to make the change that they recommend here, to cut it back to, say, once a month, it would be an additional savings of, I believe it was $137,000.
John,
Well, I'd like to know what, with this change, has this been a savings or has it not been?
No, it has been a savings because we eliminated 2 people one truck and some other things, so it was a savings, and I will get that for you, Frank.
Okay, 'cause, yeah, I'd like to know how much that was.
John, real quick on this recommendation, from my perspective, it's an enterprise fund, so I guess savings is kind of a loose term, because if you actually go to once a month, since it's an enterprise fund, to me, it's a cost issue. So, to me, identify what are they paying for that additional pickup in that month, and are they willing, if it's $2 or $3, are they willing to see their trash, bill reduced by $3? So, since it stays within that enterprise fund itself, it's not money that can be used for the general fund. To me, if they don't want the service, you just lower the fee or the cost that we charge them right now. So, my understanding, this has been a service that, over the past, that a lot of the citizens like, so I want to make sure that if we do something like that, they're willing to give up $3 to lose another month or another, whatever, so.
Okay. Thank you, and we will sure keep track of that.
Okay,
and it not only has been pretty popular by the citizens, it's clearly the number one service in all of our surveys from the citizens. And I do recall, Frank, specifically, again, not remembering the specific number, but what we did do was this last time when we changed the service and took away 2 people plus a truck, we were able to reinstall the hazardous waste program with those savings. So there are indeed savings, but I'll have to get to you what they are.
Great.
Number 9, eliminate frozen positions. This is what you had asked for a few minutes ago. We have right now 86 positions frozen in the city. 71 positions are recommended for elimination, and 50 positions are not recommended for elimination. And they have the handouts. This handout, purple and green, shows you those positions.
Where is it?
City Center.
Oh, here it is.
Where are they? Sorry. Yeah, that's it.
Where'd you find it?
Keep going. Further in.
Oh, here it is.
Jim, it's not in that. It's in the other group of papers.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know.
I think you need it, I can share some.
Okay, this shows the 15 positions that we are not recommending be decreased from the budget. And on the next pages, you'll see the 71 positions that we are eliminating from the budget, just wiping it off. And you'll see that in the 15 positions that are recommended to be kept, they're being based on, they're grant supported. For example, you'll see under the second green section, police officer, COPS grant application pending. And then program supported alarm coordinator, and then related to temporary assignments, development related, public safety, and or enterprise fund supported, such as the environmental compliance officer. So these are the 15 positions. They are not funded, but we are recommending be kept on the books. And the 71 positions that you'll see on the next 2 pages, we're just wiping off the books.
Quick question on the 15 that won't come off the books. They won't be funded in this year's budget, correct?
That's correct.
So if for some reason you need a sanitation worker 3 for whatever, it goes back, how do you plan on funding them at that point? Would you bring them back to council asking for a transfer of funds, or?
We would have to bring it back to the council if it was not within the budget. If revenues pick up, then we can have the monies that we can put it in there. And that's why we're saying, let's get rid of the 71, because we agree with everyone that we should be able to justify those as they come up. But in this particular case, because of building inspectors, for example, the development-related people, if development picks up, revenue comes in, then we can immediately move quickly and refill the positions.
The only thing I would suggest, if that's the case, and I don't know how the others feel about it, is just to let us know that revenues are picked up and we're filling that position.
Absolutely. Cut operation costs using green thinking. We're going to be surveying the residents to determine the print versus electronic copy of In Focus. We'll be evaluating black and white copies of In Focus, and we'll reduce number of budget documents printed and continue to post it to the website and continuously look at green things that we could implement. Assess primary property tax levy yearly to maintain current revenues. We will work, I have a work session with the council this fall to discuss adjustments to the primary and secondary tax rates to maintain property tax revenue in a way that offsets the effects of changes to the assessed valuation. And we will pull all of the tables and charts together for you for a fall discussion. We don't really have anything that we can bring to you prior to that. No new debt in 2010 to 2011. We believe that this means no new debt in the general fund in 2010 and 2011. We have, as we've told you, the total CIP budget of $25.2 million, which has no new debt in order to fund it. $23 million of it is from impact fees, general fund, cash, reserves, and grants. No new debt is included. There is, however, utility CIP project. The Adamant connection is funded by issuing $2 million of debt, but that's from the utility enterprise fund.
Now,
And
out of that, that's out of the total CIP budget of $25.2 million. Everything has already been purchased for this year.
this year, yes, I mean,
All the police needs and the fire needs and all the radios and all that stuff that you brought to us earlier.
no, I mean, we're still in that process of that, but I'm sorry, Frank, which year does this year mean? This year that we're in right
What
now?
does this 25.2 mil mean?
He wants to know what F11 is that.
Fiscal year 11 is next year as of July 1st.
Okay. But as of, okay, then, so for you, well, go ahead, because it might come up.
Okay.
If not, I'll ask it again.
Billboard along major rights-of-way. As you know, this will be coming forward for a public hearing on May 24th. Staff is developing an RFP, and the council work session will be scheduled this fall in order to review the likelihood of that proceeding. And Dick will also have a chance to participate in those discussions. So,
John, from a dollar, from a dollar impact, is it that we
Wait a
will
minute,
not
John. Let me
know
give you
what that
some.
impact is until you actually go out for an
What is
RFP?
I would say we won't know until we go out for an RFP for sure. We are trying to do some feelers out there for
Yeah,
the company
reviews
that
out there.
approached us. And, I mean, there are so many of these billboards up there right now. It's got to affect the market, but we don't know how it will affect the market. We will talk to the market to determine it. The guy that came to see us about 8 months ago was talking in terms, and this was prior to most of these going up, was talking to us in terms of $1 million was not unusual. I mean, so I
You had
doubt
a
that it
discussion
would-
with him 8 months ago, and this is coming up before council now?
Yes.
Who brought it up?
Well, we brought it to the city council, but the Citizens Budget Committee
Committee did.
happened to recommend it. And we were kind of looking at it from every different angle, and then we brought it forward because the Citizens Budget Committee recommended it.
I hope they all read the article in the Free Press editorially.
The consider new fees. The council meeting of May 10th, you have the user fee study back on the agenda for the council. The staff has received input from various stakeholders, which was your direction the last time we brought that to the council, including the development, community, recreation, business fees, and all of that. And then the committee also recommends evaluating cost recovery for EMT services. There are no EMTs in the state of Arizona that we're aware of, but we're evaluating it, that charge insurance companies for those services. So we're trying to find out if that's the case or not. We do bill private companies for EMS services in other cases. For example, if the city bills private companies if they request an EMS standby at their events, car racing, kart racing, IMS marathon, for example, those type of activities. We currently work with the ballpark on recovering funds when there are city-sponsored events that required an EMS standby also. So those are some things that are definite. We aren't aware of any EMT reimbursements anywhere, but we are checking into that. The one that we really want to talk to you about tonight also is that the budget incorporates, the Citizens Budget Committee said we should incorporate charging for special events. So we have incorporated for the July 4th activity, the estimated cost of the 4th of July event is $62,500. We have incorporated revenue in the budget of $72,500. And that means there'd be net proceeds to the city of $10,000. And the way that's made up is shown on the chart here. Charges for adults and kids ages 13 and up would be $5. No charge for children 0 to 12. Free parking, this is all at the ballpark. Free parking, and then once you're in, $10 charge gives you unlimited rides, mostly for kids 12 and under. But that would produce a $10,000 surplus to the city. What do other cities do? On the next chart, I show you that most of them, Buckeye is free, Litchfield Park $2 per person, Surprise bring a canned good, Peoria $5, Tolleson free, Phoenix free, Tempe $6, 13 and up free over that, Chandler free. Avondale's no event, they canceled it last year due to budget considerations. Glendale's no event, they canceled it last year due to budget concerns. And then parking, you'll see listed, everyone's free except for Tempe and Chandler. And then rides and activities, you'll see that their Surprise has a $5 wristband and Peoria a $10 wristband. So we want to move forward with the advertising and everything for this year, but we don't want to do that without your blessing in that there would be a fee charged this year, and there hasn't been in the past.
I don't know if I'm very excited about charging a fee for this, because I think it's part of the service when people pay their taxes and et cetera. I'm not sure how much the $5 is going to generate us versus the goodwill of people coming to the stadium. So I'm not real excited about charging a fee.
I oppose it.
I'm not excited
I
about
wouldn't be
that.
for it. No.
4th of July.
Yeah. Wave the flag.
But you're going to cost, it's going to cost you to
Yeah,
wait, huh?
right.
You better
There's
pay.
plenty of that going on right now, or cry out loud.
I'm not for it.
Okay, well, that's what we wanted.
Did
Thank you.
everybody else vote?
No voting, but
but-
just, you know, I've heard the opinion, I think clearly, that you aren't interested in charging a fee.
John, the only thing is, I went last year, and I thought they did charge for rides last year. Maybe it wasn't this event, but I remember going to the stadium and buying my kids wristbands for something. Did they just charge for the rides last year, the slides or something? I remember water slides. Was that Halloween
That was Halloween.
that they charged for? Okay, 'cause I didn't know which one it was.
John, you got Mike, great.
It was something with water, them sliding.
Correct. The only change to our fee structure, based on previous years, is the $5 charge for 13 and up. We have charged, even when it was at the Goodyear Community Park, we charged a $10 wristband for unlimited rides, which is the bounce rides and the water rides and things like that. So the only change being proposed is the $5 admission for 13 and up.
Okay.
But we're paying for that service, right? It's an
Absolutely.
outside services.
The city is paying for it.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, I heard that, thank you. Sell naming rights from seats to venues. The Budget Committee had a good time in these discussions, talking about seats and selling streets and everything else. But We will be developing a naming rights policy. We don't have one right now. We will engage employees to identify opportunities for sponsorships, advertising, Adopt a Park program. Our Adopt a Park program has been hugely successful. 100% of our parks are adopted. And so we're looking at, well, how can we extend that to Adopt a Parkway or something like this? And so we'll bring that back this fall and discuss it with you. The City Adopt a Park program is estimated to be a value of $20,000 in services for fiscal year 11. In fiscal year 10 hours, we have achieved over 500 hours volunteers so far. Fiscal year 11, hours Adopt a Park, we're estimating at 1,000. And for every volunteer hour, it equates to $20 per hour, which is the cost to maintain our city parks. So it's a very successful program to use volunteers. As some of you will recall, the mayor of Georgia, anybody else, at the volunteer event about 2 weeks ago, we had 23,000 hours, 23,014 hours of volunteer time that were acknowledged. There were, I believe, 240 people present at the event. So it's a tremendous benefit to the city. Free salaries for fiscal year 11. Dick, as you had, I'm sorry, I forgot as we went along, you had asked which of these we've already done or are we working on. This is one of those. I've been open and announced publicly that salaries were going to be frozen for the past couple of months, so that there's no merit increase for the third year without merit. As I mentioned, it's $1 million in fiscal year 11, 1.1 in 10, 1.2 in 9. And there's no market adjustment for the second year, so that's $107,000 for this next year, fiscal year 11, and $1.3 million in fiscal year 10. The organization right now is at 97.1% of the market for our comparison cities.
Now, wait a minute, this isn't clear. If you're freezing salaries, so in 2009, you're saving 1.2, 2010, you're saving 1.1.
History.
2011, you're saving 1.0. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what we have saved.
That's what you have saved, and that's what
We'll
you're
save.
saving.
And we'll save.
And we'll save.
Based on the fact that you haven't given merit increases,
Yes.
but the salary is the same. But there are positions, must be positions eliminated then.
Well, 80 some.
I mean, that's what that number's taking in.
No, this is what we, with the number of employees that we have, we are not paying $1.1 million this year that we would have paid if we had had merit increases.
It should be the same every year.
No, but you know,
No.
The increase should be the same every year.
Mario?
Number of employees that you
Yeah,
have. If you
okay.
have more employees, you have more. If you have less, you have less.
So this takes the existing employees on fiscal year 9 and applies a factor, and it saves $1.2 million. It applies the same factor on a less of a base for fiscal year 10, and that produces the factor of $1.1 million. And then you take fiscal year 11, which is less of a base, and apply the factor, and that's $1 million.
John, do you have a schedule of how the cities bordering us have been or have not been giving out merits or market increases for the same period of
I
time?
can certainly give that to you. Yes, we have it available, readily available. We can send that to you.
I think it would be helpful to see what they've been doing while we've been locking things down. So
What you will find is that, because we have done these surveys, and you'll find that most cities have not done a merit increase in the past couple of years. However, the fire and police unions have negotiated contracts with Glendale, Peoria, City of Phoenix, Chandler, all come to my mind, where they are being guaranteed increases, and they are still getting those increases. So we are as a city like that happens, we will fall that much further behind. But we will send that.
Yeah, we'd appreciate that.
But anyway, free salaries for fiscal year 11, yes, we have frozen salaries for fiscal year 11, and there are no salary increases incorporated into the budget. 17, consider service provision to other jurisdictions. We have the IGA with Litchfield Park, which is being received very well throughout the community, and the feedback that we're getting. Litchfield Park, the city council is very excited about this. They're holding a public hearing in the next few days, and then they're also meeting in the mid-month of May and discussing it. They are not doing this as part of the property tax increase. They have, Darrell Crossman, the city manager, has committed to me that they want to proceed with or without the property tax increase. But they are waiting until May 19th, which is, I think, the date after the property tax vote, in order to make any commitment to the city. We're looking at providing health care through the city's wellness clinic to 2 neighboring cities, which we're discussing with right now. Fleet maintenance, it came up just the other day that city-certified mechanics are to work on fire apparatus at other communities. They may not have one, and we do, so we're taking a look at that. Mutual assistance with plan review, building inspections. We have a recent agreement with Buckeye and a more recent agreement with the city of Litchfield Park. IGA with Maricopa County for the library district. Southwest Family Valley Advocacy with Avondale and Buckeye. IGA with Avondale School District for joint use of facilities. Avondale Joint Training Facility. Arizona State Land Department Cooperative Fire Rate Agreement. And Estrella High School District Fire Science Instruction, where we provide the education opportunities and they reimburse us for those costs. Share SRO costs, school resource officer costs with schools and other partnerships. We are meeting with the superintendents next week on this issue. We have met previously, and there has never been money, but we continue to pursue that with the schools, and we will continue to pursue it. We are continuing to explore those cost-sharing proposals, see if there's any way that we may find a way to do this. 19 is change billing frequency of utilities to quarterly. This one, we're trying to evaluate the equalizer program that APS offers, because that's probably the closest thing to it, where the customers would, well, except in this case, the customers, the budget committee said the customers should pay in advance for the service. So we aren't sure exactly how this will work, but we're taking a look at the whole thing, and we will bring that back to the council.
John, one of the things we'd like for you to take a look at, especially my concern if they start billing quarterly, is I know in the past they have issues with shut-offs and turn-offs with non-payment, and sometimes it's tough enough going month to month, and if you wait between quarter and quarter, I think it's going to be a little more of a stretch on those individuals if you go quarter to quarter, and I'd be concerned about increases in delinquencies if we did that. So I'd like that kind of impact before we would do anything on a quarterly basis. Okay, thanks.
Engage employees in identifying cost reduction scenarios. We've had budget brown bags with all of the employees. We've done budget email updates to the employees. I copy you on all of those. We've had employee hotline feedback and follow-up. We have an employee hotline installed that only I listen to, and some ideas have come across that way. We will re-engage the employee budget task force, and you have tonight in front of you a paper. It's employee budget task force summary information. Looks like this. It shows the 150 recommendations that the employee task force came up with. And it shows you also who was on that task force on the front page. We tried to have a cross-section of the organization, and in the police and fire areas, because of our labor work groups, we had one person representing the union from each of those departments, plus one person representing the department itself. So That what?
Online. It's online.
Is it online? No. There's 150 recommendations here. As you can see, at the first page, it says number of items either implemented or under evaluation. 106 have been implemented or are under evaluation, and that's 71%. So you may go through here and see all kinds of, I mean, this is from the employees.
Now, this was in the past or it's ongoing?
This is in the past, but the evaluations and review are ongoing.
Okay.
The, excuse me, expand volunteer support, for example, citizen patrols. We have 353 registered volunteers as of right now. In fiscal year 9 and 10, we had, as I mentioned, 23,014 hours year to date. I didn't mention that. That's year to date, so it's going to be more by the end of the fiscal year. And those have been valued at $350,000 to date. A year ago, fiscal year 8 to 9, we had 20,000 hours, $277,000 value. In fiscal year 7 and 8, we had 6,000 hours, which was $110,000 value. We also will continue to support the VISTA program initiatives. The ballpark, fiscal year 9 and 10, year to date, the ballpark represents roughly 10,000 of these hours. I mean, so there's 13 additional thousand hours that are volunteered to the city in the different activities. The ballpark volunteer is based on a differential, a rate of $13 per hour, and the regular average volunteer rate is $20 per hour. That's how we calculate the value to it. The VISTA initiatives, we have 3 that we're pretty proud of. They're working Citizen Core Council, which is building strengths to implement the Citizen Core preparedness programs and carrying out a local strategy to involve the community. Hydration stations will be a focus of that council this summer. VIPS, which is the Volunteer and Police Services, new policy and procedures. This VISTA volunteer is researching various grants to help pay for the uniforms and other programs or other items that they'd like to purchase. And neighborhood focus groups, Norma Cunningham has scheduled neighborhood focus groups in various areas and will be working with these neighborhoods to complete projects that are designated at the meetings. Freeze paid training other than mandated by law for public safety. Again, I apologize, Dick. Yes, this is something that we have already done. It's something that we've been looking at. For example, the best example of that is the mayor's assistant, Sandra Healy, is our trainer, is the city's trainer, and she has been redeployed, reassigned to the mayor's office. So not only have we significantly cut down on the training activities that the city offers by not sending people to different things, but we've also even removed our trainer. And, you know, that does cost us somewhat, because training, as you'll recall, the customer service portion of the citizen survey had a slight decrease in it from the citizen survey standpoint as to customer relations. And so the trainer is something that's very important to the city. It's something, however, that right now we can't afford. 23, consider policy for cost recovery rate on many services. This is something, Dick, that we have also been working on, and the council will, on May 10th, next week, be discussing the user fee study again, and that's based on a necessary cost recovery for services.
Dick, this is the one that, excuse me, John, this is the one that we had feedback from the outside, and that's going to be incorporated in your presentation as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The development community, stakeholders groups, and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Consider sale of city assets and skate park. This is something that, Dick, that we haven't really done anything on, but it's something that certainly we can move on quickly. The skate park, for example, we don't believe that you can sell the skate park because it's in the middle of a community park. We do believe, though, that you can put it out for an RFP to see if someone is interested in leasing it. And so we're exploring things like that. We will do a work session with the council on potential sale or lease of the various assets that we have in this fall. Maximize energy conservation. This, Dick, is a very much of an ongoing thing that we've been involved in for a long time. Review rate structure. You know, APS has a myriad of rates, as you all probably know. So we have to review the rate structure and make sure that we're categorized in the right rate structure for each item, for each tariff. So we're doing that. Performance contracting is something that where you hire a company to do a performance audit of your energy usage. They might identify that you say you need to spend $50,000 in order to better air condition XYZ. They will pay for that equipment, and then through your savings, you pay them back. So we are exploring whether or not we can do that. We're continuing delamping and controls in city offices. We're trying to remove every third light bulb, for example, fixture, and that will save substantially. We are doing street light conversions. We're doing LED conversions. We're experimenting with it right now. Right outside, depending what time we get out of here tonight, right outside on this side street coming into Veneta, excuse me, we have our LED experiment going on right there. So you will see the light fixtures are different than they are around the rest of the community. Upgrading the HVC components. This could be done as part of the performance audits that we're working on and try to get much higher performance, efficiency performance into our heating, ventilating, and air conditioning equipment. 25, maximize energy conservation continued. We have reduced our vehicle fleet in fiscal year 9 by 11 vehicles. We have reduced fiscal year 10 by 37 additional vehicles. So that's 48 vehicles that we have eliminated from our fleet. This also led to our eliminating one mechanic this past year because the workload had gone down. The use of E85 in fleet vehicles, 25% of our fleet is currently on E85. That's our current fleet is 325 vehicles. The goal is to increase the participation rate through future purchases. Anti-idle policy, we have as a policy in the police department, if the car is idling for more than 2 minutes, there's not a prisoner in it or you aren't working something, that you turn that off. We're exploring whether or not we can do that throughout the city and do it with building inspectors or things like that. So we are addressing also the idling of vehicles out in the field. Delamping of fixtures in city facilities, motion sensor switches. This is something that we're trying to get each office, my office, for example, if you come by and it's dark, it means I've been out of there for more than a minute and a half, I think, because if I walk back in, the light goes on automatically. Lead or street light I mentioned, and then appliance improvements. As we are replacing our equipment in the fire stations, we look to energy efficiency on all the purchases that we make. So that is something also that we do. 26, consider further exploration of privatization competition. We will review all potential services, and we will send a yellow paper to you. What we do right now, and Dick, this is one area where we are pretty aggressive, but there's a lot more that we probably could do. We currently rely on private providers to do all the custodial services throughout the entire city, as well as providing solid waste and recyclable collections. You may recall that we redid the solid waste contract recently, and that money in savings is it's $120,000 is going to be what we're doing with our hazardous waste pickup day. The city also relies on not-for-profit organizations to deliver human social services through the community funding program. The council just recently approved that a week or two ago. Another service currently provided by an outside agency is maintenance of our right-of-ways and park areas and things like that, where we use the Perryville prisoners, and that's a significant savings of $154,800 a year. And hopefully we'll be able to increase the usage of that also. And there are some areas we have to be sensitive to the community that we're working in. There are some areas where it's too difficult to do that because of the proximity to schools and school children and things like that. So we'll continue to evaluate all of those services and report back to the City Council. 27 in the last recommendation is set and enforce the stringent alarm ordinance. And this is an area that we have already worked on. We brought it to the council once. We are now trying to reevaluate that. The committee recommends that we do it, and so we're trying to figure out exactly how can we tighten this up and how can we do it in a manner that is user-friendly to the community. There are people who are used to having those alarms, even though 99.6% of all alarms are false. And that puts our police officers at risk. Every time they have to respond, they must respond with 2 vehicles. And so traveling at a higher rate of speed than normal, increases the risk, and just the factor of taking 2 cars off the road obviously increases the risk also. But we are taking a look at the alarm, how we enforce that. Mr. Mayor, that is the 26 or 27 recommendations of the Budget Committee and what we're doing about them.
Is there a opportunity here for the Budget Committee itself to review your responses? How do we go about doing that? I think that's
We do that?
the right
Isn't this
thing
all,
to do.
isn't this all written on, I mean, the information's there. They can meet.
Yeah, I
Maybe
just
it's
think
follow.
that-
What does legal say?
Well, are you asking if they're going to respond this evening, or are we going to call a meeting?
No.
We can call a meeting for them, and certainly post a meeting, have another follow-up meeting, if that's what the council would like.
I think we should have a follow-up meeting to see, let them talk to, back to, respond to what the city is doing about their recommendations. And I think that kind of a follow-up really, I think, is necessary. I
Well,
mean,
I really think that the city manager can address what we've done here and submit a report back to the committee.
yeah, but let them meet.
Let them meet on their own and come back to us then later on. But
Well, they don't have to meet with us, but I would think you should meet with the city manager and respond to what
Well,
the
but-
city has done.
But, and going through these 27 items here today, there are many, many, many that the city staff has worked on or is in the process of evaluating it. And the majority of them, I think, have been met by the city manager and staff. So, but I'm willing to recommend that the city manager send back to the committee with what our findings were and how their recommendations compare with what we have or what we've done and what is in the mill at the present time.
I can certainly do that, anything the council wishes, really.
I think they deserve the response.
Oh, yeah.
They put in all the time, and I think they'll be pleased to see how many are going forward. So, yeah.
I guess the question is, from the council is, do we want it organized, so meaning cost to the city, I mean, staff time again to meet. So I think is that where the question's coming in? We should do it formally so that the staff is present, or is it something that we send a package to each one of the members of that committee with a response otherwise?
Take it to its 27 items and boom, 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 boom.
And then they respond in writing to to us. I don't know. I mean, that's what you have to decide, which way you
What-
want to do it.
If I could suggest, what I'd rather see is, since these are, some of them are in progress, is hold a meeting with the committee, review it with them, like we've reviewed it here, because just getting this in the mail would, they won't understand everything that's there. So review it with them, they can then discuss and submit a report to the council. And so,
Yeah, we don't have to meet with them, but you to meet with them.
and I would just say that, I'd probably want to wait a few weeks, because some of this is still going to be chewed up and spit out by all of you, and we don't know yet what's going to be in there and what isn't.
Right.
Good point.
To
Very
satisfy
good
them,
point.
do you have an estimate or a date that do we want to put an out date on it, that we would have this back in their hands by a certain time frame?
I would think June 1st would be a reasonable.
I just
We
think
haven't
that's-
had enough time to, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's always a good thing, to have an out date on
Good.
what they can expect.
Say June 15th. We will have ruled on the budget by then, and we can incorporate that.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right?
that's
Yeah.
fine with me.
I have a tendency to agree with that, John. I think they were not looking for any specific time. They just wanted to see how we were implementing the recommendation. So, I think June 15th is probably a reasonable time, to get back to them with that.
And I agree, in all fairness to the committee, we deserve to inform them of how we feel about their recommendations and how we have resolved many of them on our own, and we get back to them and we'll meet and exchange positions.
And Mr. Mayor, you had asked about the furlough section. We are getting into that next section.
Can we take a break? I'm sorry.
I think we probably could use a break.
Yes.
Okay, how about, 7 minutes, adequate?
Depends on what the line is out there.
Go for 6:20.
Yeah, that gives us time to hit.
Thank you.
And then let the numbers man talk to you, and let Larry talk to you, so we'll see if that works okay. This is where we're at, May 3rd, the work session on the CBC recommendations, which we have just concluded, and then the work session on presenting the draft budget, which we're going to start now. And I want to mention, Nancy McFillan mentioned that, people can't see these, and I apologize for that. But the only thing I would say is perhaps come up a little closer. There's nothing we can do right now for tonight, but we can also see to it that they get copies of this. So I apologize for that. The economic indicators, there's just several that are worth mentioning. The CPI was up 2.2% in February from the prior year, which isn't good news from our standpoint. Locally, we had a decline in retail sales tax for March of 2010, down 1.7% from the prior month. There's the uncertainty of construction sales tax, down 39.6% from the prior year, and down 87%, $19 million from 07 and 08. Stagnant commercial market, it's almost not stagnant, it's it's scary. Housing, we had 50 single-family permits issued in March. We had 48 single-family permits in April. This was compared to 65 single-family permits in April of last year. We are still a little ahead this year for single-family permits, but this is still fluctuating up and down from month to month.
John, these figures, do they include the foreclosures and surcharges, or are they just
These are just new
new?
single-family homes.
Okay,
yes.
good, thank you.
John, is April when that credit expires?
April 30th. yes.
So you may see some changes in the numbers in May and June once that credit goes away.
John, what's the healthy number of permits per month? Not a boom, a healthy, just a,
I would guess 200 in that range. I'd be thrilled if we got to a consistent 100. Jobs. Arizona lags behind the national economic recovery, and I think we will continue to do so. We project very slow recovery here in Arizona. The unemployment remains constant at 9% for Maricopa County, and we're doing very well at 6.5% for Goodyear. And I just wanted to show you the unemployment rates in the cities around us. This is from February of 2010. We, at 6.5%, have the honor of being top ranked with Peoria. Litchfield Park's at 8.4, Avondale 8.8, Holliston 8.9, Glendale 9.3, Surprise 11.2, and Buckeye is 11.4%. How did we get here? Where are we today? Declining revenues have been tremendous. Development-related revenues over a 5-year period have declined by $10.6 million. Construction sales tax over a 4-year period have gone down $19 million. State-shared state income tax, 2-year decline, $2.3 million. We had the adjustment to the rainy day fund to target level for the fiscal year 10, $16.9 million budget. That was $3.1 million. The additional costs that we've incurred recently, the debt service stadium is $5.3 million. Operating costs for the CIP, $400,000. Employee health insurance and benefit costs, $400,000. And the operating costs for the budget of $2.1 million. We've had significant budget reductions from 2008 through the proposed budget that we're working on right now of $17 million. The historical ongoing budget cuts over the 3-year period, in fiscal year 7 and 8, we cut the budget $3.6 million. In fiscal year 8 and 9, we cut $3 million. In fiscal year 9 and 10, we had an operating budget with spending reductions of $6.8 million, and then we had mid-year budget reductions of $800,000 and $1.5 million, for a total of $15.7 million in budget reductions over this time period. The employee benefit reductions to date, no merit increases we reviewed earlier, 3 consecutive years of $3.3 million equivalent savings, no market adjustment in 2 consecutive years, $1.4 million in savings, loss of tuition reimbursement, this is the 2nd year for $280,000, loss of longevity pay, $123,000, that's a new takeaway. Loss of vacation buyback, again, a new takeaway. That's $116,000. Loss of health retirement savings contribution, that's $190,000. That's, again, a new takeaway. Criteria-based promotions, a new takeaway. It will represent $126,000. And then the 2nd year of uniform allowance cuts will be $184,000. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Larry, and he'll walk you through the proposed budget.
Can I make a suggestion? Councilmember Loretano and Councilmember Pizzillo just both spoke about comparing pay of our people to other cities, and you thought that, I agree that comparing it to Phoenix is not a very good comparison. Probably Tempe isn't, and Scottsdale may not be. But you have these 8 cities here on page 23, which are, with the exception Glendale is really in our size range. Peoria is quite a bit bigger. But if we could compare those 7 cities with us on pay and on benefits and what actually has been reduced and compare us with them, that might be worthwhile knowing.
What page is that?
23.
What's the slide number on it?
23, page 23.
Page 23 has the cities.
The unemployment rate.
Oh, the unemployment
Yeah,
rate.
yeah. Just using the names of
Slide
the cities.
46.
Those are fairly representative cities, I think, and they're all West Valley, by the way.
The only point I would make, Mr. Mayor, and that we can do whatever you all want. The City Council has approved 10 comparative cities. I mean, so.
We did that in a different time, and I think we were sold on a package which we probably shouldn't have said yes to, because comparing us to a city with unions like Phoenix and others and they're so much larger, it's a tough comparison. But these are fairly close. then I think it'll be worthwhile.
I think the question you asked was on directors or higher positions and
I
what they're
think
paid.
it was actually both, because I would agree with the mayor on that, because, like I said, some of those cities, those larger cities, they are so bloated, to be blunt. I don't think we want to compare ourselves to them, because then we're just going to be bloated. And then my other part was that, you know, where does it fall in the management, and where does it fall in the actual people, you know, the line employees? Where are we losing them? Where are we going to lose them? And where do the salaries fall? Because it's hard for me to imagine the salary savings if we have a lot of middle managers as opposed to we have a lot of people who are doing the customer service and right out there. You know, so I guess it's kind of both, but I would like to see it compared to cities that are closer to our size and our demographics.
The only thing I would caution you against, I mean, it is important for us because we do compete in the Phoenix metropolitan area market. And so we have to look at all the cities in that market. I have no problem with including these other cities, but Litchfield Park is no comparison to us. Tolleson is no comparison to us.
Well, Tom,
Yeah,
you can exclude those two if you'd like, but the others are comparable. Similar growth rates, I think similar aspirations. So
It still gives us the opportunity to say, no, we want to be at this percentage of the market. I mean,
Yeah, one of the keys, I was looking for salaries, but one of the things I wanted to know is we've frozen salaries here for the last 3 years, and we've cut a lot of the benefits. And I know as a result of contract with some of the others, I wanted to know whether they were doing the same thing as well. I wanted to know if they were freezing their merit, whether they were freezing their market, and, you know, on the average where we are, you know, as a whole. So it wasn't just, you know, the percentage. And also another, I think, great indication is the employees per thousand. I mean, and again, compare apples with apples on where we are employees per thousand, because that's still, I mean, we're a full service city. We have parks, we have recreation, you know, we have police, fire, et cetera, full blown. So, you know, I think that comparison is helpful, and the fact that it's been going in the right direction, you know, from an efficiency standpoint, 11 to under 8 now if you take out the ballpark. I think it's nice to see where the other cities were, you know, 3 years ago when we were at 11, and how they're moving their employees per thousand and from an efficiency. So I think all of that in a whole helps kind of see where we're coming from a personnel standpoint as well. So I'd like to see that in addition to just numbers
It's a
on
lot of
those.
work, but I think that you're going to find that we're doing well.
But hasn't HR done these studies over a period of
Yes, we have.
the 3 years? Well, can't you pick that information?
Well, you have most of that in your questions and answers that I distributed to you a couple weeks ago, but we will gather it all together in one spot, and it'll take a couple of weeks because we also have to do a few new surveys for some of these cities, but, you know, we can do that.
Well, and I guess my question is also even kind of is a little bit more, where are they now? Because I know Buckeye just took cuts. I know if one of our Phoenix in there, I know that they're losing their car allowance, their phone allowance, their 401k deferred. You know, Peoria's going to a 4-day work week. I'd kind of like to know where they are now and us compare, because where we were 5 years ago in the boom and where they were, I don't know if that's a really good comparison.
yeah, I agree with you. And benchmarking has value, and that's what you're really talking about doing. And benchmarking today, how do we compare with these other cities? We talk about loss of longevity pay. What have they done? You know, what have the other cities done to in some way, work this recession?
They've been laying off, Mr. Mayor.
Well, some of them haven't been as aggressive.
Well, no,
There
some
was just an
haven't,
article in the
some
paper
aren't,
we
some are
sent one of the
doing
cities,
it.
and they have not done anywhere near the cuts we've done. So I think you're going to find a little bit of both. But, you know, education never hurts any of us, and information never hurts anything, so,
We can certainly do that.
yeah.
Thank you. Larry?
Okay, as we put together the fiscal year 2000.
Slide 50, excuse me.
Yeah, we're on slide 50. As we put together the budget, we find that the city is poised in good position moving into next year. We're predicting a favorable ending fund balance for fiscal year 10 of about $7 million. And this will help to soften the landing moving into fiscal year 11. Through a series of significant budget cuts and right-sizing the organization, the budgeted fiscal year 11 general fund operating revenues of $56 million will support the estimated operating expenditures of $51 million, leaving an operating surplus of $5 million. This would include all operating expenditures such as salaries, contractual services, and commodities. However, as indicated in both October and January financial updates, the city is facing an ongoing structural deficit of approximately $4 million in the general fund. Total ongoing sources are not adequate to support all ongoing uses, which include the stadium debt, the operations for the HERF, which is the street department, and for the stadium. Current general fund revenues were budgeted at $60 million and are expected to come in slightly below budget at $58 million. This includes 9 months of the sales tax rate increase revenue of approximately $3 million. The decline in revenues can be attributable mainly to the slowing development and construction activity within the city. Other revenue sources remain relatively constant. Total general fund revenues for fiscal year 11 are estimated at $56 million, which represents a 5.7% decline over the prior year budget of $60 million. Again, significant changes are mainly due to the economic slowdown and most notable the development and construction activity. Construction sales tax budgeted at $3 million is down from $6 million.
So just real quick, Larry, on that slide then, next year you're predicting pretty much flat, less about $800,000, it looks like. Is that correct? Revenues for your general fund?
From our revised estimates
Right.
for the current year, but from the original budget, about $3.5 million.
Oh, okay, so since revenues and expenses are budgeted based on your projected revenues, you've actually had to come up with some, I guess, what, about $3 million worth of cuts to try to balance this year's budget coming up?
And we'll be going through that
Okay.
real shortly.
I have another question. On the sales tax, the .05 sales tax increase that we had this year, is that $3.2 million? Is that the additional tax, or is that the total sales tax?
No, the $3.2 million is the additional tax estimated for the 9-month period that was implemented.
Where is just the plain sales tax?
The number above it is the non-construction sales tax at the previous rate, and then the construction S/T is the construction sales tax. So there are 3 lines that add up to the total.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Projected fiscal year 11 general fund expenditures are estimated at $51 million, or nearly 8% lower than the prior year budget of $56 million. This can be attributed to the reduction in the carryover from the prior year of nearly $2 million, plus other reduced operating expenditures of approximately $2.5 million.
Is it, Larry, fair to assume that the $37.9 million in budgeted in 09-010 and the $36.5 million projected in 10-11, some of those cost savings of those positions that have been frozen that won't be filled?
That is correct. That is a big portion of that savings. Oh, I skipped one. I'm sorry. That's where it just was. Yeah. Moving ahead to balance the budget, we begin with all available one-time sources that total $30 million. This includes $16.9 million from the rainy day fund, which is 4 months operating reserve from fiscal year 2010. It also includes $5.2 million of unallocated fund balance. That represents savings from both fiscal year 09 and fiscal year 2010. It includes $3 million from construction sales tax, In fiscal year 11, revenue, it includes $1.8 million of carryover from the CIP in fiscal year 10, which was discussed at the last meeting and will be discussed further later on in this presentation. The chart on page 54 shows the balanced budget by category, and all of these one-time sources are highlighted on this chart as I just indicated previously.
Can you pause there for a second, Larry? Just on what you have highlighted there on the white. So that's 16, it's hard for me to read. It's 16.9, is that the 16.9 contingency? Is that the first line there?
Yes.
And then the 1.8 is actually already committed, but it's being carried over as projects already in process, so that money is something that wasn't spent in this budget year, but is committed to the next budget year. Is that?
And what that is, for clarification, and it will be discussed in a bit, I believe, but that is the MC85 money that was programmed for fiscal year 9-10. The cash is not needed until, I believe it's July of 2012, and the proposed budget will actually be reapplying some of that in the interim to the public safety projects that were discussed.
Okay, then the next line down, the 1.1, is that by policy, you're putting what, 1.1 into the reserve fund? Is that what that is, funded depreciation?
No, this is the accountant in me that wanted to tie this to the comprehensive annual financial report, and we included a $1.1 million receivable in the general fund, expecting reimbursement from the stadium once those retail liners were sold. So I showed it up here as a reserve for the retail liners, but you'll notice down below, we also show it as a reserve, so it comes in and goes out in the same amount.
So that's money that's got to be there.
It's not really cash, it's a receivable.
All right. Okay, then the next line item, the 2.2, what is that?
That represents proceeds from the 2008 PIC bonds that were sold to finance the facilities that the Reds are using.
Okay.
We sold $34 million. There's about $3 million of funds that weren't needed, and the 2.2 will go to next year's budget. There's about $1 million that is actually reducing it this year.
So that, in essence, is the only way you can, that's what you had talked about earlier as far as savings. It's the only way that money can be spent, since it came from the PIC bonds, is to pay the debt service associated with the stadium.
That is correct.
And that's part of the one time that's helping balance the budget, I assume.
That is correct.
Okay. Then the one.
The general fund.
Right.
That is correct.
Then the next one, the 5.3?
287.
Yeah, 287. What's that one, Larry?
The $5.3 million is the unallocated fund balance, and what it represents mathematically is the estimated ending fund balance in the column that says estimated fiscal year 2010. You see that $7,093,000 at the bottom of that column?
Okay.
And it is that minus the carryover budget of $1.8 million.
Can it be used for anything?
It can be used for anything. That is correct.
Okay. And in the new money, it's your construction sales tax that you got budgeted at 3.
That is correct.
So I guess my question is if, and again, we may have some disagreements on this, but it's my understanding that the funded depreciation account right now doesn't have any money in it unless you're putting money in it from last year. Is that correct?
We're coming to that.
Okay. So that could be part of it, of the 5.2, where that could come from?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm just trying to get an understanding of that $30 million. Some of it can be spent, some of it can't be spent. So just for clarification, I appreciate that. Okay.
So, Larry, do we have a fund balance as of 30 June of $7 million? Is that an unallocated fund balance?
That is an unallocated fund balance, of which $1.8 million represents the MC85 money. That is correct. That's allocated to MC85 that we're recommending applying to the public safety projects. But $7 million is our estimate, yes.
The 5.2 is what's unallocated, or can be used for anything, if what you said, yeah.
2 point, whatever.
Are you going to be covering how we're going to use that money, you said?
We're going to cover the other uses in a minute, and then if that doesn't answer your question, we'll come back. The proposed uses for the budget for this one-time money include the rainy day fund, which at 4 months operating estimates would be $16.3 million for fiscal year 11. We still are setting aside the retail liners for $1 million, $1.1 million, excuse me. The $1.8 million CIP carryover to be reprogrammed, $2.7 million for capital improvement projects, $2 million of which is for the 303 right-of-way, $1 million for other one-time uses, which include purchase of street lights as well as some additional expenditures on the public safety, again, that were part of the costs that were shown to you last week. And then $1.5 million for the fleet replacement reserve, and $500,000 for the insurance reserve. So that's the $24.9 million as proposed.
Just probably for everybody's benefit, what is the insurance reserve fund?
The purpose in this case in the insurance reserve fund has been set aside in past years, and as things got tight, it also didn't get included. But one of the things that I think is very important that we keep in mind is that our property and casualty policy has a $250,000 deductible. We, in the budget, do not have a budget sufficient to pay one claim that would hit the $250,000. And this would be just twice that level as a simple way of looking.
Okay, I just thought it would be benefit to everybody to kind of explain that line item.
I apologize, at the bottom of the screen, that shows an unallocated fund balance of $1.3 million at the end of the year, which we will get to in a minute. But, yes, get to that in 2 slides. So in the balanced budget, the subtotal from the one-time is $5.2 million, and that is recommended to offset the $4 million structural deficit to leave an unallocated fund balance in this budget of $1.2 million. As we...
Did you tell us what the structural deficit is comprised of?
That was the previous screen, and if we look at this on page 58, I'll show you what it is here. The line on this screen, which is slide 58 in your presentation, and I can go back to others if I need to there. Do you have it? Mm-hmm. Okay. The structural deficit is the operating surplus comma deficit. What that is the ongoing expenditures, including transfers to other funds, exceed our ongoing revenues. That's what I'm referring to in this case as the structural deficit.
For example?
In this particular chart, if you look at fiscal year 2011, as proposed, the budget has an operating deficit of $4 million. That's about halfway down in that chart.
I see that.
That $4 million is the structural deficit. That combined with the $5.2 million, which is the net of the previous chart, which is the net of the one-time sources and the one-time uses, those are the that is what would be funding that operating deficit for the current fiscal year as proposed.
Larry?
I'm sorry. What does the 4.005 comprise?
That consists of the net of operating
For
revenues.
example, what's in there?
All of the
The
sales
baseball
tax,
diamond.
yeah, all of the sales tax that do not include the construction sales tax are in that number. All of our general fund revenues are included there. The fund balance and the one-time revenues are not included in there. On the expenditure side, it includes the operating expenditures, the ongoing expenditures that we've talked about, and it includes the transfers to the various funds to pay for the bonds on the PIC bond. It includes the HERF amount, and it includes the operating subsidy to the stadium.
Larry, I think, to help you there, Mayor, I think if you go back about 3 slides where you have the revenue that has a little excess on the operating, and then the transfers of the debt for the stadium at $5 million, the operational shortfall at $2 million, and your HERF, that is what's making up the shortfall. I think that's what the mayor's trying to get to, is how did you get to the $4 million? I think you go back one,
What page?
right, no, it's the one that you showed where your operating revenue was X, you had a little excess in your operating revenue, and then as a result of the debt service on the stadium, as a result of the operating costs and your HERF transfers, you were $4 million short.
This
That's the
slide.
one I think is,
And it's page 50, or it's slide 50.
I think that answers the mayor's question. I think I was trying to get to.
And we actually, and semantics may cause a problem, but operating surplus, which is the green line, we have a $5 million surplus, so the budget is balanced from an operating standpoint. But then you have transfers out, and that's the stadium, HERF, and LTAP, which is something we'll get to. It's the $300,000 of LTAP, and that's $9 million. And so the structural deficit that Larry's referring to is the $4 million that's left over. That help?
Now, did that structural deficit previously include transfer of funds from the general fund to water?
Not last year.
It's been several years. The primary fund for water and sewer has been the secondary property tax on GO bonds and not the general fund. I believe there was 1 year a capital project went in 3 or 4 years ago. I can't remember what year that would be.
So we basically use general property tax collected from the entire community to pay for water bonds, although we tried not to do that 2 or 3 times in our time.
That's right.
We're still doing that until last year or this year.
For 1 more year, yes.
To what extent?
Another year?
1 more year of property taxes from the secondary, 4.3 or 5.3? 4.3.
Yeah, and the actual next year funded amount recommended would actually be approximately $2 million, and then that'll be phased out completely.
Isn't that really the primary problem we're facing, is that we've been putting money from the primary or secondary property tax into water when we should have been using enterprise funds if we could have?
Well, I thought that's why we had the
That's why we-
enterprise study, and we had that staggered rate increase over time, and that's why we knew coming forward we would still have a couple.
But our shortage of money.
Well, yeah.
But the general
Different
fund
sources.
wasn't the one that was paying, the secondary property tax paid that amount, so it didn't impact the general fund cash balances.
But it did impact our ability to, bill.
To issue other debt, it
Yes,
absolutely
it
did.
did.
Yes, for different projects, that's correct.
Right.
But it didn't impact the operating part of the budget, I guess is what I'm saying.
And we have 1 more year of this? Is that
Yeah.
what you said?
That's what he said.
$4 million in a year is enormous.
Yeah.
Particularly since some percentage of our people aren't getting any benefit from that.
And that has been phased out. It was, if you recall, the rate increase that the council approved took place over a 4-year period of time. The first year of that has been implemented. The second year will be implemented in January of this year, and then there's 2 more. And after that point, they will be
Didn't we, in
completely,
between there, we did a delay because we decided that it's a little bit much. and
Last year,
gave-
we delayed until January
That's right.
1st of this year.
I just remember, in that process, we would be 1 year ahead if we hadn't made that delay.
And when I first sat in the council advance, a little over 2 years ago, I was shocked when I heard that the general fund was subsidizing the utility fund.
That's been ever since
And the taxes, the secondary property tax was going towards it. So you all told me, make sure you get to the point where it's self-supporting.
Well, that
We
came out
did
of
that.
the first year I was on council.
Okay,
So-
we did that, though, this past year with the operating budgets. Nothing from the general fund is going towards the utility funds, and now there's 1 more year left of the secondary property tax.
It only took us 12 years to do that.
Yeah, we've done this 3.
That's exactly right, that the water rates, for some reason, the past councils felt that it was okay to subsidize people's
Yeah.
utility bills out of our general fund. And that's basically what it was. Obviously, they didn't want to bring it forth, whatever their reasons were, they didn't do it. So now we're trying to make up for what should have been done in the past, so that's where we're at.
Well, at one time, the entire council lived south of I-10.
Well, that's beside the point.
But
They should have
I
caught
know.
on to that quickly and
I know.
changed it.
Dick and I have been 3 times.
Yep.
We've got assurances that this is going to end.
Well, John's trying. Good job, John.
Yeah, John. Since you've been on, it started to
You
change.
did it. You did it, John. But I've been waiting 12 years for it to happen.
I guess that's
But
progress.
it really affects our capabilities.
Borrowing money, yes.
Yes, hell yes.
And has for many years.
Taking into account the $4 million ongoing deficit and applying the sources and uses,
I'm sorry, I don't know where we are now, because I'm.
page 58 again, slide 58, I'm sorry, not page 58. And applying the one-time sources and uses, as I just discussed, the projected ending unallocated fund balance for fiscal year 11, as proposed, is approximately $1.2 million. That is a surplus. Now, taking a look ahead to fiscal year 12, you see the arrow points that money is applied over in this model into fiscal year 12, and we've completed our forecast for the general fund for the subsequent year, and predicting a continued structural deficit, although improving, but year-ending unallocated fund balance of $4.2 million. We are recommending to carry forward the $1.2 million fiscal year ending 11 ending fund balance to help offset this. We will continue to monitor the revenues and expenditures and develop contingency plans accordingly over the next year.
Let me just real quick, Larry. Do you feel a lot of the equipment's been aging as a result of the trying times. That's usually the first thing that gets hit, police cars, et cetera. And I hear some of the numbers now, what it costs to operate some of those cars are really starting to go up because they
I'm going
haven't.
to talk about that in a moment.
Okay.
Okay, budget initiatives that we have incorporated into this year's proposed budget is the parking ride operating cost, $60,000. Health insurance increase, which we had talked about earlier, was $1 million. We've been able to bring down to $400,000. Increase in water costs for parks, that's both our increases and Lipsco's increases calculated, $300,000. Elections, there's 2 elections there, 65 each, for $130,000. Additional building inspector position is one that we've added back in simply because we were not able to keep up, and that is $66,000. Telephone system operating costs of $60,000, and supplemental for bus service, the LTAF I mentioned, due to the loss of LTAF funding by the state legislature having swept it all, we've had to add $300,000 for that. So there's total budget additions of $1.3 million. For one-time uses, we have the purchase of the APS streetlights. We reviewed this with you quite a while ago, but about a year ago. That's going to cost us $420,000. And we have the agreements that are now finally out of APS, and we're looking at those. So hopefully we'll be bringing that to the council within the next few weeks.
We need to go dark sky.
The what?
We need to go dark
Oh.
sky, get rid of all
That wouldn't be all that bad. Our electricity costs us over $1 million. Fleet replacement, this is the $1.5 million, Joe, that we've talked about. And that is the, for the fleet reserve, fleet replacement. The insurance reserve, Larry talked about the $500,000.
You feel the 1.5's, you feel comfortable with the 1.5?
I feel comfortable with 1.5, but it's not enough. Because we have to spend upwards of 1.1 of that 1.5 just to take care of the equipment that we have put up. And the, that's coming up in the slide. The personnel, the budget reductions includes 21 frozen or unfilled positions at $1.5 million, and the contractual services of $800,000, and the commodities of $300,000, for a total of ongoing reductions of $2.5 million.
Okay, on page 61, you say you're cutting personnel costs by 1.5 million.
Yes.
But in 52, you have the estimate for the end of this fiscal year was going to be 36.3, and the projected for next year goes up 200,000.
As the best as I can recall, Mr. Mayor, 400,000 of that, for example, is the health increase that I just referenced, because that's budgeted in personnel. I don't know what else is in there, but the 400,000 health increase is in there.
Well, then there's still $1 million. It's unclear. If trying to compare these two charts.
We will certainly do that and get back to you and let you know. Whoops. At this point, I wanted to talk about, Joe, the reference to the vehicles. On the fleet replacement, disposal to date has been the oldest cost-intensive vehicles. It does not include fuel costs, only maintenance and repairs. The police department 2002 cruiser we have is 4 times the maintenance cost per mile of a 2007 cruiser. 2002 is costing us 95 cents a mile right now, and the 2007 cruiser is costing us 24 cents a mile. This is maintenance and repairs only. Non-public safety fleet equipment, we have more than 2 times for a 2002 piece of equipment versus 2007, both trucks. But again, the 2002 is costing us 90 cents a mile, and the 2007 is costing us 39 cents a mile. I mean, so there is significant cost to us on an ongoing basis for trying to maintain an older fleet.
Second.
John?
Yes.
What's the life of some of those vehicles? If you've got a 2002, that sounds like it's getting near the end of its life.
Oh, it's more than the end of its life, yes.
We've gone past it.
Yeah, we have not replaced a police vehicle, I believe, in 2 years. And police vehicles are high mileage. I mean, so you should be replacing some every year. And that's why we have this 1.5 budgeted, of which we'll use probably 1.1. But at least it will leave 400,000 in the reserve to add to next year.
To get new vehicles?
Yes.
Okay.
Other operating funds. Very quickly, I'll go through these. And we don't have much detail here, but it's the Highway User Fund. We have the revenues and the expenditures shown of $3.5 million and the expenditures of $3.5 million. The largest portion of this operating budget is at 67%, or $2.3 million, and that's for contractual services and primarily for street maintenance and repair. Another significant cost that's in this budget is the street lights, and that's just over $1 million. We are anticipating a street light maintenance or street light purchase agreement with APS that will have future electrical savings. So we are looking forward to that day when we can start decreasing the amount of electricity. Personnel is 29%, or $2.3 million, and this includes repair and maintenance of our streets, traffic signals, and street sweeping.
John, and when it comes to the highway user fund, potholes, repair of streets, that type of stuff, do we have enough money in there? I'm always concerned with safety. I know general fund subsidizes a lot of the highway user fund. Always concerned from a safety standpoint, are we going to have enough money coming in there? Because you have the other side, the risk management side, if we're not taking care of the streets, the suit areas go up. Do we feel comfortable that we've got to level it such that we're taking care of our streets?
I believe we do, Joe. It's $1.5 million, isn't it, from the general fund into the HERF?
Yes.
$1.5 million. We're maintaining that at the present rate, which is required by statute, by the way. So, because you are required by statute in order to be eligible to get HERF money to put in a minimum effort onto the streets. And I feel that $1.5 million in our particular case is sufficient for the street.
Now, this HERF is state?
Highway users fund, yes.
Highway, but it's state.
It's state sales taxes.
Do we get anything from the lottery for potholes?
Lottery?
We used to.
The lottery funds, and that is in there, what we get for the lottery, the original lottery, or what we now refer to as LTAF 1, could be used for the same purposes that the HERF money could. That is the money that was recently swept in the state budget for the current fiscal year and next fiscal year.
Unfortunately, there's never enough money that the state gives us. It's always general fund, and it has to subsidize those projects.
The water fund budget is $10.2 million, and there you see the revenues and the expenses. The debt service expense remains the largest portion of this budget to accommodate needed system improvements and growth. There's also a $1.4 million transfer to the general fund to offset the cost of billing, collections, and government overhead. Personnel costs $1.9 million and represents 19% of the budget. The wastewater fund is $7.3 million. Again, the largest portion of this goes for debt to accommodate system needs and growth. The wastewater fund also contributes to the general fund for administrative services and overhead at approximately $800,000 per year. This fund is responsible for the wastewater treatment plants, lift station, and sewer lines. Revenues estimated at $7.3 million largely come from user fees or fees for or charges for services. Miscellaneous is interest or damage fees.
John, you mentioned the wastewater fund contributes, what, $800,000 to the general fund?
Yes.
For overhead? Does the water contribute any money back?
1.3, I believe it is.
Okay.
I think it's 1.4.
1.4.
Okay, so it's covering some of its overhead costs?
Yes, it is. Sanitation fund is $5.4 million. The largest expenses for the contract services with waste management at $3.6 million. Oh, I'm sorry, $3.6 million. Sanitation operations provide for bulk trash pickup. That's $1.8 million right now, and graffiti removal, $50,000. The total revenues are $5.7 million, and primarily come from user fees. The stadium fund is $9.2 million in revenues. Debt is 52% at approximately $5 million. Personnel represents 23%, or $2.1 million. Maintenance costs such as water and electricity are also a significant cost of the stadium operations. The stadium is operational 12 months out of the year and hosts Cactus League spring training during the month of March of each year. The total revenues are $9.2 million and include $2.1 million subsidy from the general fund.
Don, I think you said 5.2, but it's really 59% debt,
I'm sorry.
so it wasn't 52, it was 59.
Thank you, yes. Next is the capital improvement plan that we have reviewed with you 2 weeks ago. So I'll go through this very quickly. This is the total CIP by project type. 44% of the budget is recommended for public safety and facility needs. 32% of the budget is appropriated for water and wastewater projects. 15% for streets. 6% for technology, and parks is 1%. By funding source, The majority of the budget, 68%, is from development impact fees. Funding from water bonds is approximately 8%. Funding from grants is 4%. And the general fund portion of the fiscal year 11 budget is $5.1 million, or about 20% of the budget. The general fund projects include the Cotton Lane Bridge payment, that's $690,000. We are still looking at trying to get that over several years, but it is not completed yet, the discussions. So right now, we owe $690,000 next year.
That's with the county, right?
Yes. Telephones,
Who's our partner in that, on the bridge?
the county is our big partner. Newland is our next partner, and King Ranch did not participate. They owe us, at the time of development, I believe it's about $13 million.
Whoa. How do we get that back?
They need to start development.
Development. Develops it.
Let's see, public safety radios are $1.6 million. 303 right-of-way, this is the El Cedro payment, is $2 million that we have to make, and that's, I believe, we have 4 of 6 payments. And MC 85 funds, these are leftover that we will not reallocate this year, $165,000. This is a summary of the total program for 5 years. It's over the 5-year period. It's $73.2 million, and that's totally funded. This is significantly smaller than previous years. The key difference is related to the city center. Past capital plans budgeted for the city center project. We are also deferring projects. This is a common practice of cities during difficulties with available funding. City deferred capital projects last year, for example, EMR Park, and that will continue to be deferred, and we will address the deferred projects in a moment. The total CIP budget, as you can see in the far left, not the far left, but the second column to the left, fiscal year 2011 is $25,243,000. The water projects, we have the Central Arizona Project Municipal and Industrial Subcontract Capital Charge. That's a mouthful. Since Goodyear's cap subcontract amount is approximately 11,000 acre feet, and the per acre foot is $15, the city pays that whether we take the water or not, and that's related or called the take it or pay provision. Adaman Water Interconnect, $3.5 million. $1.6 million of that's from water development fees, and $1.9 million from water bonds. And the Gila River agreement is $1.8 million, and as we mentioned 2 weeks ago, we are working to see if we can perhaps get that out of our budget from.
What is that specifically?
That's the payments to the Gila Indian Nation.
Okay.
For the water
Right.
that we bought 2 years ago. Parks projects, $246,000. This is the improvements that Frank has mentioned. The Palmatier Park and Parc des Pas, we are making improvements to those 2 parks.
That number's incorrect.
Oh, okay.
I brought it with me. It's $257,029.
Okay. 257,029?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Wastewater projects, Goodyear Water Reclamation Facility, the 157th Street plant. Expansion is $1 million. That's for design and construction. The Corrugate regulatory compliance is $320,000 development fees. Lift station upgrade is $200,000 sewer development fees. And wastewater reclaim system is $1.3 million of development fees. No general funds are involved in these projects. Street projects, we have the, as I mentioned, the 303 right-of-way, $2 million. The Cotton Lane Bridge, $750,690 from the general fund and $60 from transportation development fees. Traffic signal system, $1 million. $350,000 is from the streets development funds and $650,000 from the MAG funds that they have granted to us. And then the MC-85 carryover is the $165,000 that we referred to earlier.
Hey, John, on that 303 right away, when's the last payment of that $2 million? How much farther out do we have to go?
2 more years, so let's see, 6, so it'd be fiscal year 11, 12, 13.
We owe 6, so this is,
Yeah,
So after that, then that frees up $2 million for us?
yes, to the general fund.
Fine, yeah.
you know, we accepted that because we rerouted 303 around Rubbermaid and Toll Brothers Development. And at the time, there was plenty of money. Well, there isn't plenty of money anymore. Is there any way we can argue that to see if the state or MAG or the federal government can participate in that particular right-of-way? That's for a freeway. It isn't for a local road.
It's ADOT, yeah.
We could sure take a look at that, Mr. Mayor.
It seems like it's worth the effort
Okay, yeah, we will.
because it's general fund money.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Cotton Lane Bridge you asked about, the total cost was approximately $42 million, Dick. The city is owed $20 million from one developer as a result of the city of Newland fronting the costs. Of the $20 million, we're owed about $14 million, and Newland is owed $6 million. These are the only funds or commitments that we're aware of. There is Montage, of course, but those we've basically written off because of the bankruptcy. And then there's Canyon Trails, you might recall, some agreement with 16 property owners, but those are set to expire in the relatively near future. Those are the only the 3 particular areas where we owe money. So there won't be any future surprises.
Yeah, and the only way we get that $14 million is when they start developing.
That's correct. Public art projects is $79,000 from water bonds. Facility projects, the Public Works corporate yard infrastructure is $1 million. That's from Public Works development fees. Corporate yard paving is $800,000 from development fees. And the communications 911 facility is $3.8 million, and that's for police development fees. So again, no general fund dollars are included here. And then the public safety projects, the Regional Wireless Cooperative, which is RWC, oops, it's spelled out, is $5.5 million. $1.95 million is from police development fees. $1.95 million is from fire development fees. And then $1.6 million is from the general fund. Technology projects, $1.5 million. $825,000 is general government development fees, and $675,000 is from the general fund. The 5-year capital improvement plan meets all of our contractual obligations. It addresses public safety critical needs, new growth infrastructure needs, facility space needs, and minimize use of general funds. So it's a very aggressive program, but it's also very responsible in that it relies heavily upon impact fees that we already have in our hands collected. The deferred projects are the Bullard Wash Linear Park. That's in the budget for fiscal year 16 to 20, which is the out years unfunded. EMR Park Phase 2 is fiscal year 16 to 20, which is the out years unfunded. Traffic signals, fiscal year 13 is funded. And public art is fiscal year 14 is funded again. City Hall and Library, we want to revisit annually, but it's shown in the plan as fiscal year 16 to 20 out years as unfunded. And at this point, I'd like to ask Brian to come up and talk about the City Center project. Brian?
Thank you, John. Mayor, members of the council. Council has had several presentations on City Center over years, but certainly over the last many months. So tonight, our focus is really on the budget implications, the financial implications, And so we aren't going to be focusing on anything else other than just the numbers, if you will. I do know that Mr. Rob Langford, our development partner, was here. I think he just left with his associate, Mary Pampu. So I don't know if they plan on coming back in or not, but they were here for most of this, the balance of the presentation tonight. What we have is there are really going to be three things we're looking at. We now have three options, and those options, if you remember when we were before this council last time, one of the options, well, the options were we go full bore with city center, city library, infrastructure, and the city park. So that's one of the, what we call the original proposal. We also then looked at a reduced scope. That reduced scope is really predicated on Mr. Langford at the request of council to take a look at, okay, if he were to go forward, finance this, what would it look like? And what that did is he came back with a proposal, and we'll go through the numbers here in just a moment. But what that looked at is going forward with City Hall and the infrastructure, but not going forward with the library or the 4-acre park. So what we did, he actually had two components to his proposal. One of them was if we lease it for a period of 5 years, and then we do what we call a takeout. That takeout would then be we would purchase it from him at that time. It was a 4-floor facility, of which the city would have leased 3 floors, and then the fourth one would have been reserved for private sector. So that was his proposal. He had that in two ways. Again, one where he would finance it, and we would lease for 5 years, purchase it after into that 6 year, or lease it for 25 years with no equity built up. And he agreed, we all agreed that that just was not a good option, paying a lease payment for 25 years with no equity to show for it. So what we did is we added an additional option, and it was to look at the city financing at a reduced scope level. And what that means is it would have a city hall, and it would have $9.2 million in infrastructure. So you'll see those numbers in just a moment. We looked at the O&M costs. It's very important. We actually did it in you have a half dozen slides here total, but we did it in year breakdowns where it's year 1, year 6 because we have some changes, market changes in O&M, year 11, and then finally year 25. So we'll go through that with you. And then really, what are the funding sources for this? So we talked before, there's secondary property tax if bonds are sold. We can always sell bonds. The challenge, as always, is to try and come up with a debt service. Looking at general fund, is there a way there? And then how is a general fund used either for lease payments or subsidize a secondary property tax, for example? So the first slide, what you have is this is the total project construction costs. Again, the three scenarios, the green or left column is the original scope, and I call the rest extra crispy, but that's my lousy sense of humor. But the first green column is city financed, and that, if you remember, that started off at $67 million. We looked at how to finance it. We looked at really trying to engineer this down to as low a level as we thought possible, working closely with the Langford team. So that was $50.5 million. And the cost of that debt, and what that means is that's adding up the payments over time. And if you remember, that was a 10-year interest only with 15-year principal interest thereafter for a total of 25 years. We would be using development fees. You'll see it on the side of about $10.9 million. Developer contribution from Langford team as per our development agreement is 1.5. So total is $88.2 million in construction costs, but those are the that's what you have before you. Now, this anticipates that we would issue $38 million in bonds. As I said previously, first $10 million interest only, and then after that it kicks in principal interest. We're assuming a rate of about 5.25% on those general obligation bonds. The second column, or blue column, is the reduced scope. And as I said at the beginning, that is one where we are doing the city hall, no library, no park, but we will have $9.2 million in infrastructure. So the cost of that debt over that period of time is $63.8 million. And that bond, if you'll notice, it goes from $38 million with the library in the green column down to $32 million in bonds if we were to take the library out. We do not factor in a developer contribution. Could that happen? Certainly. We'd have to renegotiate contracts for that to happen. Total project costs for that would be $70.1 million. Finally, the last column is the Rob Langford proposal, and that was the one that we brought before council. But what it shows is really trying to compare column 2, the blue, with the purple on the third column. And that one is lease-owned reduced scope, but you'll notice that that's a $45.7 million project. That includes City Hall and the infrastructure as part of that. Cost of that debt, you'll see, is at $75 million, of which we can use $6.3 million in development fees to assist with that. So the total project costs, the debt plus using development fees, kicks that up to 81.6. We would actually have 2 bond sales as this last option. The first bond sale would be for the infrastructure. Public infrastructure is not part of Mr. Langford's proposal, so that would be a bond of about $9.2 million for that. Then at the end of the 5-year lease term, we would then be looking at an additional bond to then go out and service the City Hall as we would acquire the City Hall from him.
And that last column does not include library.
Does not include library. Only the green column on the far left includes a library in these 3 options.
Or a park.
Or a park. And the park, I would add that the park is funded by development fees, park development fees potentially. However, it does not make sense to put it out there without a library. So that's kind of it really doesn't have much of an impact. So I wanted to hit year 1. We'll hit year 1, 6, 11, and 25, and here's why. Year 1, and comparing these, you notice that if we were to go forward, our interest only on a full original scope is $2 million a year. On that, we would have about $700,000 in additional, what we call net new O&M. Now, we're able to keep the operations and maintenance costs down for several reasons. We're looking at getting out of the leases that we have here, not this building, but where fire and police administration are, and development services, engineering, community development. We're looking at getting rid of the lease where we're at for the interim library. So it's those types of things that we looked at, okay, what is really the net new?
What does that amount to in dollars?
$1 million?
Well, let's see. Veneta leases are $1 million. The interim library location is $70,000. We would also be looking at saving operational costs here, but it would be a savings of about $330,000, and moving out of here, converting over to the current city center.
So that's in addition to the million you're talking about. $1,330,000. Cool.
Right, but what I'm trying to communicate is a net new O&M over and above everything what we pay today. Let's just assume that that's the baseline.
Yeah.
So it's everything over and above that. We are now looking at $700,000, and primarily because of the increased size of the library. It's a lot larger. Our agreement with the county is that we will finance the operational side of that. So, and I'll go through how that changes a little bit over time. But the total for option 1, or the original scope is 2.7 for year 1. If we were to take it on our own and go forward without a library, you'll see that the difference there is it actually decreases our payments from $2 million down to $1.7 million. Again, this is interest only for the first 10 years. The net new operations and maintenance here would be about $200,000 for a total of under $2 million for that option, so $1.9 million. If we went with Mr. Langford's proposal, we would have first year is our lease payments to him would be about $2.2 million. We do get some credits because he'd be leasing the land from us. but it's also what we call triple net, so it would have tax, insurance, maintenance, some of those additives to it. Plus, we would be financing the infrastructure of $9.2 million. So that's what kicks that up to $3.1 million. Again, just looking at bond or lease payments combined. The O&M, we assume it's going to be very similar. A little hard to tell what they're going to do on the top floor, but we kept it at $200,000 for our portion. So total annual, it is at $3.3 million for the third option. This starts to change as you get to year 6. What happens in year 6? It went to sleep on me. Year 6 is really the market change on this is that we are absorbing all the costs of the library. What that means is that with our agreement, our IGA that we have with the Maricopa County Library District, we're over time, years 1 and 2, we're still subsidizing at lower levels, but once we get a couple more years out, we will be fully subsidizing their operational costs associated with the library. So with option original scope, bond payments, you'll see that they stay the same. Year 6, again, that's 10-year interest-only loan. O&M is a part that takes the jump, and for a total annual in year 6 from now, $3.8 million. And what we have here on the bottom is just to show you a comparison of how this goes back to the original year, year 1. So it increases that cost from year 1 to year 6 of $1.1 million. A lot of numbers, but I think it's important to go through these. If we were to go forward with a reduced scope, year 6, really not much of a change there. You go up $300,000, and that assumes that we stay in the interim library over by the current City Hall, so in that smaller facility, but we are now subsidizing that to 100%. So that really is a difference there. And on the lease own, what happens there, very similarly, the bond payments, we would start to fund those in year 6. That's $3.2 million, but we're not paying the rent anymore. So really the net difference is $400,000 in year 6. And please, if you have any questions, stop me.
What would, if we didn't do interest only for 10 years, but did principal and interest from the very beginning, what would that payment go from 2 to 1?
Principal, it goes from about, if we go on the original scope, it goes from $2 million to $3.7 million. So about $1.7 million additional dollars. And that is on the first, the green column. If we were to do it on the city financed without library, it goes from about 1.7 up to 3.1 million. And then finally, the third column, well, as I went through that, you'll notice that that just goes up 400,000. Year 11, and this is next to last slide with these numbers on there, but what year 11, what happens is, remember, we go from an interest only in options original scope plus a city finance reduced scope. So that interest only goes away, and now we are starting to pay the principal and interest. This is at a time that, 10 or 11 years out when this starts hitting us, about the same time as we would have perhaps principal kicking in for ballpark development complex. However, I know that there are a lot of efforts underway certainly to look at how STA can come forward with additional funding for that. So year 11, I talked about what the differences are. It goes from interest only to adding principal. That kicks us up to $2.8 million additional on city financed original scope for $5.5 million. And you'll see that we do have the full library in there. The city financed, that adds another 1.7 kicking in the principal. And the Langford really stays the same. So you'll notice that it's fairly similar in year 11 to the annual with Langford's proposal with our city financed reduced scope. Okay, the finish line, year 25, we looked at a 25-year scenario for all three options. And what we've done is we've included the interest payments in here, so you know what the full cost of these scenarios would be. So City Hall, Library, infrastructure for Eco Park, that's just a tad under $76 million for debt payments. Operations and maintenance over that period of time, $40 million. And you'll see that it's $116 million for the entire cost of this project. You'll see how that drops down if we reduce the scope. Take the library out, you drop to $75 million city financed, or $86 million or $87 million with a Langford proposal. So once again, we really tried to compare like figures to like figures just to put this out in terms of pure budget dollars. But with that, Mayor, members of the council, Manager, that's the financial portion of the presentation for City Hall, City Center.
Let's talk about this one.
Well, I think you already know where I'm coming from, but the first question is your purple really is not apples to apples because it doesn't have the park or the library in it. Second thing is do we have any bond capacity if we build this? And I guess another question I have, since we're now talking about a city hall as opposed to a city center, because under the last proposal, there is no park or library, so we're looking to build a city hall or lease a city hall as our employees are dropping, not a city center. And it's always been my understanding what the public wants out there was parks and library. So why would we build a city hall when our employees are going down and we're trying to streamline? The second thing is we've got 3 years where we're looking to possibly revisit the sales tax increase. And if we use any general fund money for fixed costs, it just makes it more difficult for us 2 years from now to try to do something with that half-a-cent sales tax increase because we'd be adding fixed costs that there's nothing we can do about. If you add employees or whatever, there's always some opportunity to cut costs. But if you add a fixed cost like a lease, then you possibly, tie your hands when you want to try to do something with that half-a-cent sales tax in 2 years. So I personally think capital project, we should use capital funds. And if you can come up with a way to do a city center, because to me it doesn't make any sense to build a city hall without park and library with bonding capacity, GO bonds, which require a secondary property tax that keeps us within the $1.60, I'm with you. That's it.
I'll comment. I think the only one that's really reasonable is the green one. From the standpoint of we need a library, we need the infrastructure, we need the park, we need the city hall. And by getting those, I think then we have capability to achieve what I really want, and that's higher ed in that area. And without doing this, I don't think we'll get higher ed, and I think we're on the verge of possibly losing it forever. Brian, you said that we had the GO capability.
We, Mr. Mayor, specifically, we have the authority as voted by our public. So our citizens have given us $45 million in bond authority to go out and sell bonds. And by selling those bonds, and not take you through all the details, but could we sell bonds today? Yes, we could. Could we debt service those in the future when our property tax values are slated to drop significantly over the next couple of years? Then we would not be able to finance the debt on those bonds. So the short answer is yes, we can sell, but we would not be able to pay those back. And I think it's year 12-13 when we're projecting that the property tax revenues for secondary will actually drop such where we can't even finance existing debt by about $750,000 a year. But that starts to change. It does change. So what we're looking at is it's the projections of construction sales tax, the projection of where our property tax valuations are going, is to continually and consistently look at that to see when those changes occur, such that we feel comfortable that we could go ahead and fund the debt service for general obligation bonds for this project.
We have a bonding power up to what, 45 million? That would be the max?
Bonding authority up to $45 million for general government, which includes City Hall and library.
Where would we get the difference between the 45 million and 88 million?
No, it's 38 million.
We would actually sell $38 million in bonds. I'll go back to the one slide if that helps.
So you're working two bond areas then?
We would sell $38 million in bonds for this project, but when you look at the cost of debt, we're factoring in the interest payments as well. But the bond sale itself is only at $38 million.
What we have, Dick, is the 10.9 million in developers' fees that would be applied towards it, and then the 1.5 million developers' contribution. So the total project cost is 50.5 million. And then the 75 is with interest.
So who pays the development fees?
Langford,
Oh, okay. Pays all the development fees on everything.
the 1.5 million, yeah.
Well, is there also general government fees that can be used for this?
Development fees here, these are actually general government development fees and library development fees as a revenue source for it. But yes, we would have to pay development impact fees, Mr. Langford would, at the time that he pulled the permit, which he'd probably just pass along to us.
You know, if you take the total tax structure that we have with food and beverage, retail, sales, construction, real property taxes, and we decided that this is what this is what we're receiving today, and this is what we expect to receive in a year from now. If we realigned how we collect taxes, increased one and decreased another, and commensurately would have to cut the cost of government. But if we would increase the real property tax and reduce a sales tax, and therefore also find ways to cut government costs, is this doable? And at what level?
You want to take that one, John?
I'd say no, it isn't doable because of the cutting government. I believe that the government is what the community wants right now, and the concern I have, Mr. Mayor, is, as Brian mentioned, in 2 years, we are upside down like home foreclosures with the present debt. We cannot finance the present debt. So that I think is significant enough that how do we come up with this? It would take maintain a public safety operation. It would just cost far too much money to slash out of the budget.
Well, but we've got a budget committee which recommended that we do cut the cost of government, and I think the services we're providing are excellent. I don't see why I would want them to decrease, but I'm not sure they would. But all I'm asking for is if we realign how we collect taxes, is it possible that we could make that happen?
I'm sorry, I don't totally follow.
No, when I'm in a example form, and I'm not suggesting this, but example, if you go from $1.60 to $1.80 or 90, what do you raise and therefore have a capability now to do GO bonding and pay the carrying cost and determine what that increase is, and then take that, reduce retail sales tax or food and beverage tax or something like that, so that it doesn't cost our people anymore, it just realigns how we collect, and therefore is more suitable to a CIP.
The only thing I have to say, even that, is that the sales tax is more discretionary. I mean, I can say, okay, I'm not buying the big TV this year, but I have to make the house payment.
The problem.
I can't, because you're saying property tax, right? Change it and raise our property tax.
I'm saying, don't raise our taxes, just raise that one element of taxes and reduce it somewhere else. I'm not for a tax increase. This city's not ready for a tax increase.
So you're saying change the formula on how we do the secondary and the primary?
Yeah, I'm saying that if you would raise real property taxes, by what amount would it take to be able to achieve the green? by what amount would it take to raise it from $1.60 to $1.70, 80, whatever, and determine what that amount is in dollars, and then cut that out of retail sales or food and beverage.
I think we can get back to you with some numbers there, because we've been playing with that as an option.
No, that's all I'm asking for. The analysis is worthwhile.
The
What
thing,
makes this happen, and we should have that option.
Are we still talking about a 10-year interest-only loan, though?
I'm not gung-ho about that.
I'm not either.
I'd
That's
like
not
to see
something
what
else.
principal and interest would cost us in this tax increase.
So-
For real property.
So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that if you look at tax, Goodyear tax as a whole picture, you have sales tax, property tax, food and beverage tax, that type, okay?
Yeah.
Construction tax. And so if you were to realign by changing property tax and then lowering sales tax, correct? Okay, so we know by lowering sales tax, that's $3 million right there. Then, so.
Well, only if you lower it by 0.5.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying.
But, yeah, we don't know what we have to lower it by. And you might, if the governor's going to be, when you eat out in Goodyear, if the governor's tax passes, you're going to pay 11.3% for your meal, in taxes
yeah.
for that meal. It'd be nice if we could get that back. So, this might be a time to do that sort of, at least to analyze it, is all I'm saying.
Well, if you find out a way financially to swing green, I'm for this.
That's all I'm
But,
trying to,
yeah.
is it possible? I think we need to
Let them-
investigate it.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's try to get figures and see how we can manage it.
And are we all, okay, well, if it's even manageable, but also I am with Mr. Bazzillo about, I would not be interested in anything that did not include the park and the library. That, the whole central
The green
part
does
of.
that. The green
Well,
does
I know,
that,
that's what
yeah.
I'm saying. If anybody else along here is saying, no, just build City Hall, I would like to hear that,
No.
if somebody else has that feeling.
No, I'm just for, if you're going to do it, you need to do it nice, you need to do it right, not just throw up an office building out there.
Exactly.
Because it's not going to attract anybody else if it's not going to attract the retail and everything else that the city center was.
I hate to see
fact,
the
I'd like to
reduced
take that one
scope.
step further.
Well, that's just it. Reduced scope is not what we wanted.
You're going to bring the performing arts, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
I'm before
What
that.
I got to vote. What I don't think you're considering here is what you're doing to the rest of the city. And that's, it has to do with sustainability, it has to do with the quality of life in this city. You want to do something to bring density to City Hall, yes. But, and Joanne, you should know this and be aware of this and be afraid of this more than anyone else. You have a business in that area. There is a corner on Litchfield Road and Van Buren, and you're going to take City Hall out of that corner, which is a huge amount of people, and take it over to Estrella. And then you've got businesses in those other three quadrants that are having a difficult time as it is now. You're going to make it look like the south end of Litchfield Park, which we have destroyed, and Western Avenue and all of that, and you're continuing to destroy more of the historic Goodyear. And I am against that.
What, you lost me. What are you talking
So you're
about?
saying not to build the city center?
No, what I'm saying, build a city center, but not City Hall.
Well, yeah, no, I don't want that.
What would you have?
Well, you would have a library, you'd have a park, you'd have the universities.
Oh, you won't.
You would have
I
your
think
own.
you
have a lecture hall.
misunderstood completely.
You build, well, you can build it then. You build and put your council chambers there, whatever you want, but you
Back to
You
your
don't
original
understand
scope
what
was
you're doing to the
75
corner of
million? What
Van
was the
Buren.
original award-winning city center scope was what?
67 million.
67 million. Well, I'm sorry. I'm a person that will save and wait to have exactly what I want. I'm not someone that will go and find creative financing to build something that's not what we wanted in the first place. So if we can realign things, I'm willing to listen. I will never not listen.
can I,
But I'm not going to go for, if we've always been talking about, I hate to use this analogy, but if we've always been talking about the Lexus and that's what we want, and we're not willing to wait because we're going to go and buy the Toyota, I mean, that's just how I'm saying. I would, you know what?
Joanne, I agree with you.
Nobody disagrees with you.
My entire
the way you
problem
were
with this
going
discussion
sounded
is
like it.
that we just finished the budget. We just finished talking about the budget, and we can't meet certain things, and we're worried about making this next year, and we're worried about this. We're saying we're
can
going to
wait.
cut this. And of all people, I want this city center built, but I'm having a real hard time with this conversation just because I really don't see it. I don't see the numbers. I do want the top of the line. Worked a long time to get that. But for some reason, I'm not going to kill it on you tonight, but I have to tell you, I'm having a hard time with even considering it at this point after hearing the budget tonight and beforehand and listening to the budget committee and all of that. I just think we're playing games with numbers. We're figuring out, you know, and I just, you know, I just don't think we could play tricks and games and interest rate and special financing to do this at this time.
I don't agree with you. I don't think we're playing games here at all. We're trying to build a great city, and you just can't wait to do that. You try every possible means to get it underway. All we're talking about here is there a possible way that we haven't looked at to do it?
But is it to build the Toyota?
If you,
That's what I'm asking.
No, don't even imply that, please.
I asked it. I didn't imply it. I said, is it?
Well,
That's the question.
Asking the question implies it. I think we shouldn't do this if it isn't first class. If you aren't going to be proud of it in 10 years, we shouldn't be doing it today.
I agree.
I have a question.
real quick, if you realign your revenue sources and increase your property tax, which everybody in the city will pay, for reducing sales tax, which people outside the city pay, what you're doing is, yeah, you're increasing your capital budget, which is fine, which I'm not going to increase property tax. I can tell you that right up front. Second thing, though, is you're decreasing your operating. So money that you need for parks and roads and a variety of other things, you're decreasing as well. So you got to be careful when you start realigning, increasing property taxes for sales tax. I'm just saying, you got to be careful. They're two different revenue sources, and one deals with day-to-day operations. So, and it's hard times out there. I just have problem increasing taxes on all our residents to a property tax right now.
I think the thing here is, Joe, I'm just trying to make sure that we've attempted every possible method to make this happen. That's all. And I think trying to find reasons not to do it doesn't make sense at this juncture. Let's seek information and let's try to be better at what we do. And that's all we're trying to do here. How can this be funded? I can't answer that definitively no right now. And I think it's worth seeing if there is an avenue.
I think we've all listened. I think we keep waiting. We keep hoping. It still hasn't come to fruition yet. So I'm still listening. Like I said, I'm always going to have my ears open, and I'm not going to not do that. But yet I'm not.
I think we all agree that it has to be first class, or it doesn't need to be done. Sticking a building out there isn't going to help anybody. And I don't know when year 6 actually takes effect. By the time this all gets through, is year 6 actually year 8 from now? I mean, when is this actually going to happen? And we talk about the universities. Has anyone gone and looked at the private universities that have fundings and have them be a partner? I agree. I can't see putting sales tax, because if people's property values have gone down, that's increasing their taxes. I mean, it's not technically, I know the formula and everything, but when I see my bill and my house has gone down, my escrow account has gone down, I expect my monthly statement to go down, not to stay the same, because I'm hearing everything's going down, and it's just a citizen, I'd be like, wait, what's wrong here? But I do agree, we need to get something done. I think we need to keep looking at it. You know, like I said, when is year 6? Is year 6 really 6 years from now? I don't think so by the time you build it. And we have a city of strip malls. We don't have a center. We don't have any place for people to be there. And as a business owner, one thing we looked at when we moved from a small office to a large office, before we take on that debt, what are our revenues and can we pay for it? Because it doesn't do, you know, I'm looking at this like a business. When we moved our office from a very small place to a much larger suite, we said, can we afford this? And if the answer was no, then we're like, we can't do it. And we had to see where we were going to raise revenues. And if it's a different revenue source, I don't have a problem, but I don't want to raise taxes, even though it's kind of, I think, an accounting measure. So that's just where I am.
Well, I don't want to raise, I don't want us to
I know
raise
you don't want to raise
taxes.
taxes, but I think it's
I'm
going to
just
have
trying
that
to realign
thought
it so that
process.
it's more suitable to buying long-term objectives. That's all I'm trying to do. Because I still am opposed to last year's raising of the 0.5. So I'm not for raising, I just want to see, look at how we collect revenue, and if we collect it differently, can that make this doable? That's all.
I think we understand where you're coming from, Jim, and we can do that and come back to you and take a look at it.
Is it possible at some point, we've tried this about every which way of Sunday, that we can actually put it on for a vote at some point?
I think we're ready.
Looked about every which way we can but lose here. I mean, at some point, we got to vote on this thing. I mean, if he comes up with the alternative, which realigns taxes, is that something we can get on the agenda to say, are we willing to lower this one and increase this one to build this city?
Yeah, that's what we get to, yes.
Okay.
And in fact, if we raise the one, we have to go to the citizens, don't we? For a property tax increase?
Mr. Mayor, not on the secondary property tax, you would have that ability to.
For primary, but, oh, cool. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're going to have to, this is associated with a budget. We have to vote on the budget.
I realize that, but, I mean, in my view, we've looked at every kind of way that we can't afford it, and if we can, then let's put it up there and vote on it.
Well, we haven't
That's
looked
just
at it
my-
like this.
Yeah, you're right. We haven't looked at increasing property taxes and decreasing sales tax, so you're right. It is a new look, so.
We understand. We'll come back to you with
Figures.
what I'd like to do now is just summary and policy questions. City manager's recommended budget, we are reducing the expenditures by $2.5 million. Reduction in personnel, as I've referred to already, 21 positions. $1.5 million reduction in contractual services, $800,000, and commodity savings about $200,000. Reduce employee benefits, we've suspended longevity pay, $123,000. We're proposing to suspend health retirement savings, $190,000. We're proposing to suspend vacation buyout, $116,000. We're proposing to suspend criteria-based promotions, that's $126,000. We're proposing to continue the suspension of tuition reimbursement, that's $140,000. And we're proposing to keep the reduction to the uniform allowance. In the fire department, that's $92,000. We have no merit or market increase. We're not proposing any merit or market increases to the budget. That saves about $1.1 million. Additional ongoing cost increases. We have budgeted health insurance, 9% increase health care premium. It's a 25% increase to the employees in what they pay. Utility costs of $300,000 for the water rates and the Lipsco proposal that's currently being considered by the ACC. $120,000 for the CIP operational costs, and that's $60,000 for the park and ride, and a net operation cost of the phone system of another $60,000. Use of one-time funding, we're proposing PIC bond savings to use to help offset the deficit of $2.2 million. We're proposing to put $1.5 million into a fleet replacement account. We are proposing to put $500,000 into an insurance reserve to take care of the $250,000 loss should that ever occur. And CIP priority projects, we have the public safety radio system upgrade, the telephone system replacement, and the 911 communications facility. No general funds are going towards that. There are no pay cuts nor furloughs in the recommendations, and that's based upon other recommended impacts to employee compensation. And I believe that we have responded to the committee's recommendations to address employee compensation by doing those, and not needed to balance the budget for fiscal year 11. This is, in the final slide, shows a summary of where the department directors are in relation to our comparison cities. As you'll see, the city managers at the top, Goodyear data collection 1011 is 0.88. So you're at 88% of where you should be. The attorney's at .90, where he should be. The city clerk's .94. The only three positions are community development director, the deputy city manager, which, as you'll see from the chart to the right, went up because Mark Gaylord's in that position right now as an average, and then the human resources director, 1.11. And those three people are primarily because of the length of service. They all three have been with the city for a long time. Those are the places that we're at. And the other policy questions, the City Center, I think we've gotten some good direction this evening about what you want and what you need, and we'll be able to give that to you. CIP priority projects, we've reviewed those with you. The use of one-time funding for streetlights, that's $420,000 in order to buy the streetlights. And the LTAP funding, that's the $300,000 in order to continue the transit service. And the 4th of July potential charges, we understand that's going to come off the table. So with that, Mr. Mayor, that's our presentation in under 4 hours.
So we can discuss all that at one of these follow-on meetings.
That'd be fine. May 10th, yeah.
Anybody want to comment right now on anything? Nope.
Just real quick, Mayor, when Frank mentioned earlier about the dark sky ordinance, was there ever a survey among our citizens, yay or nay on something along those lines?
Not that I know of.
We did the dark sky, we worked on that years ago, and the only street that we thought that was considered at that time was Estrella Parkway, and it is a dark sky all the way up the Parkway. And they said that in the future we were hoped that maybe other streets could follow that. But so far, no one's been interested in doing that.
Just curious.
Because we like it that way. You can see the stars, it's nice. Don't want any street lights. And
How many increase?
when mine goes out, Harvey always makes certain that the APS gets up there and changes, puts a new bulb in.
What would
But
that do to public safety? How many increase would we need in the police department?
I don't know how you do those measurements, but
I'm
I can
just curious.
see if they have.
Yeah.
'Cause,
And I would also check, Joe, on whether or not they're.
we have less problems in our area probably than anywhere. It's so dark in our area that a burglar's afraid to come up there because we're all sitting there with shotguns out. And they don't know that. I mean, it's.
Now they
it's
do.
that.
Now they do. Now they do.
So
Okay.
it's that.
Are we good to go?
Yeah.
Meeting adjourned.